My daughter Tiana passed away 7 years ago, leaving behind a hole in my chest that no amount of time could fill. Since that day, I have sent her husband exactly $40,000 every single year. I told myself it was for my granddaughter Maya to ensure she had the best education, the best clothes, and a life free from worry. That brings the total to $280,000. I thought I was paying for her future. But last Tuesday, when I handed over the check, Maya grabbed my sleeve. Her fingers were trembling and she pulled me down close enough to smell the fear on her breath. "Grandpa," she whispered so low I almost missed it. "Don't send any more money to Dad. Just follow him tonight. You will see." What I discovered in the next few hours didn't just break my heart, it terrified me. But before I tell you what I found in the dark, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are listening from. I read every single one. My name is Thaddeus King. I am 73 years old, and for 30 years I worked as a senior auditor for the IRS. My job was to look at numbers and find the lies hidden between them. People think numbers are cold, but to me they always told a story. They told me who was greedy, who was desperate, and who was corrupt. But when it came to my own family, I was blind. I let my grief over losing Tiana cloud my judgment. I wanted so badly to believe that Brad, her husband, was the grieving widower he pretended to be. I wanted to believe that the $40,000 I scraped together from my pension and investments was going to the one thing of Tiana's that was still alive, my granddaughter. I pulled my 2012 Ford sedan into the driveway of the house on Elm Street. It was a beautiful house, a colonial-style two-story building with white pillars and a manicured lawn that looked like it had been cut with nail scissors. I knew how much this house cost because I had paid the down payment for it 10 years ago as a wedding gift. It was supposed to be their sanctuary. Now, as I looked at it through my windshield, I felt a strange knot in my stomach. The blinds were drawn tight, even though it was a sunny afternoon. I checked my pocket. The envelope was there. Inside was a cashier's check for $40,000. It was Maya's 13th birthday, and this was the ritual. I would come over for a brief, awkward visit, I would give Brad the money, and I would leave. Brad always said he didn't want to overwhelm Maya with emotion, so the visits were kept short. I was a fool to agree to that. I stepped out of the car, and my knees popped. Getting old is not for the weak. I walked up the path, and before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open. Brad stood there. He is a tall man with that classic all-American look that sells real estate. Blonde hair, perfectly gelled teeth that are too white, and a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. "Thaddeus," he said, his voice booming. "You are right on time." He didn't step back to let me in immediately. He stood in the doorway, blocking my view of the interior. It was a power move. I had seen CEOs do it during audits when they were hiding assets. "Hello, Brad," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am here to see Maya. It is her birthday." Of course, Brad said, stepping aside finally. "She is just finishing up some homework. You know how demanding that private school is. We want to keep her grades up, right?" I walked into the foyer. The house was cold. The air conditioning was blasting, and there was a smell in the air that made my nose twitch. It was perfume. Heavy, expensive, and floral. It was not Tiana's scent. Tiana always wore a light citrus splash. This smelled like something a woman wears when she wants to be noticed. "Where is she?" I asked, looking around. The living room was spotless. Too spotless. There were no books on the table, no school bags in the hallway, no signs of a teenager living there. It looked like a model home used for open houses. "She will be down in a minute," Brad said, checking his watch. He was nervous. I could see a bead of sweat on his temple despite the freezing temperature of the room. He looked down at my jacket pocket where the envelope was bulging slightly. "So Thaddeus, I appreciate you coming by. The market has been a little tough this quarter, you know. Inflation and all that." I looked at him. Really looked at him. Brad was wearing a pair of Italian leather loafers. I know the brand. They cost at least $600. His shirt was silk crisp and new. On his wrist was a watch that looked like a Rolex Submariner. "Inflation seems to be treating you just fine, Brad," I said dryly. He let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, this old thing. I have had it for years, just trying to keep up appearances for the clients." "Thaddeus, you know how it is in sales. Perception is reality." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him until he shifted his weight uncomfortably. That was the old auditor trick. Silence makes guilty people talk. But Brad didn't talk. He just kept glancing at the stairs. Finally, I heard footsteps. They were slow and hesitant. I looked up and saw Maya coming down the stairs. My heart broke a little. She had grown so much in the last few months. She looked so much like Tiana, the same high cheekbones, the same dark eyes. But the light was gone from them. "Happy birthday, baby girl," I said, opening my arms. Maya didn't run to me. She walked. And that was when I saw it. I looked down at her feet. She was wearing a pair of canvas sneakers. They were dirty, and the rubber sole on the left shoe was peeling away from the fabric. There was a hole near the pinky toe. I looked back at Brad's $600 Italian loafers. Then I looked at my granddaughter's shoes. Rage is a funny thing. Sometimes it is hot like fire. But for me, it has always been cold. Ice cold. I felt my blood temperature drop. "Hi, Grandpa," Maya said softly. She came into my arms and she felt thin. Too thin. I hugged her tight, smelling the strawberry shampoo she used to use. But underneath that, I smelled fear. I pulled back and looked at her. "Maya, what happened to your shoes? I thought I sent money for clothes last month." Brad stepped in quickly, his hand landing on Maya's shoulder. His grip looked a little too tight. "Oh, you know kids," Thaddeus, Brad said smoothly. "She loves those old beat-up sneakers. It is the fashion these days. Grunge is back in style, right, sweetie?" Maya didn't answer. She just looked at the floor. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. Brad's eyes locked onto it like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Here," I said, holding it out. "For her tuition and her expenses." Brad reached out and took it. His fingers brushed mine and his skin was clammy. "Thanks, Thaddeus. You are a lifesaver. Really. I will make sure it goes straight into her college fund and school fees. Can I have a moment with my granddaughter alone?" I asked. Brad checked his watch again. "Actually, we have a reservation, a big dinner planned, her favorite place. We really need to get going." "Just 1 minute, Brad," I said, my voice hardening. "I am not asking." Brad hesitated, then forced a smile. "Okay, 1 minute. I will go get the car started." He walked out the front door, leaving us in the foyer. The moment the door clicked shut, Maya grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She pulled me down so my ear was level with her mouth. "Grandpa," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "What is it, baby? What is wrong? Why are you wearing those shoes?" "Don't ask," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please don't ask him. He gets so mad when you ask questions." My stomach churned. "Mad? Did he hurt you?" Maya shook her head, but her eyes said something else. "Just listen to me. That money, he doesn't spend it on me. The school sent a letter yesterday about late fees. He threw it away. I froze. Late fees. I had sent $40,000. Private school tuition was $25,000. There should be $15,000 left over. Grandpa, don't send any more," she said, urgency in her voice. "He is going out tonight. He said he has a business meeting, but he is lying. Follow him. Just follow him and you will see." The front door opened. Brad stuck his head in. "All right, time to go. Chop, chop." Maya pulled away from me, instantly wiping her eyes. She put on a fake smile that looked painful. "Bye, Grandpa. Thank you for coming." She walked out past me, keeping her head down. Brad gave me a thumbs up and followed her, locking the door behind him. I stood on the porch for a moment, listening to the silence. I looked at the envelope in Brad's hand as he got into his black SUV. I watched my granddaughter get into the back seat. She didn't wave. I walked slowly to my car. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I got in and sat there for a moment. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I started the engine and drove away. But I didn't go home. I drove 2 blocks down, turned the corner, and pulled into the shadow of a large oak tree. I had a clear view of the intersection Brad would have to pass to leave the neighborhood. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out something I hadn't used since I retired. A small black notebook and a pen. I opened it to a fresh page. Date October 12th. Subject Bradley Sterling. I turned off the engine and cracked the window just an inch. The air was getting cooler as the sun went down. I sat there in the darkness waiting. The grieving father was gone. The generous grandfather was gone. Thaddeus King, the auditor, was back on the job. And I was about to audit my son-in-law's life. 20 minutes later, the black SUV rolled past the intersection. I waited 3 seconds, then turned my lights on and pulled out. The hunt was on. The engine of my Ford sedan was off, but the heat from the day still lingered in the metal. I sat in the darkness under the oak tree, my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. It was 11 o'clock at night. Most 73-year-old men are asleep at this hour, tucked into bed with a heating pad for their back. But I was wide awake. The adrenaline of the hunt was pumping through my veins, something I hadn't felt since my days at the IRS when we were closing in on a major tax evasion case. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee from my thermos. It tasted bitter, just like the feeling in my gut. Maya's whisper was still echoing in my ears. "Don't send any more money to Dad. Just follow him." The lights in the house down the street flickered. Then the garage door began to rumble open. I slouched lower in my seat, making myself part of the upholstery. The black SUV backed out slowly. Brad was driving. I could see his silhouette against the dashboard lights. He wasn't wearing the frantic look of a man rushing to a business emergency. He looked relaxed. He had one arm draped over the passenger seat the way a man drives when he owns the road. He turned left, heading away from the business district. That was my first clue. If he had a crisis at the office, he would have turned right toward the highway. Instead, he was heading deeper into the city toward the river. I gave him a 3-block lead before I turned my ignition. I didn't turn on my headlights until I was out of the neighborhood. I kept my distance. Following someone isn't like in the movies where you ride their bumper. You hang back. You let a car or two get between you. You watch the tail lights, not the license plate. We drove for 20 minutes. The scenery changed from the quiet tree-lined streets of the suburbs to the flashing neon and glass of the downtown district. This was the expensive part of town, the place where cocktails cost $20 and parking cost $50. We call it the Platinum District. It wasn't the kind of place a struggling single father goes on a Tuesday night. Brad pulled into the underground parking entrance of the Meridian. It is a high-rise luxury apartment complex where the rent for a one-bedroom starts at $4,000 a month. I knew this because I had audited the developers of this building 5 years ago. I pulled my car to the curb across the street and killed the lights. I couldn't follow him into the gated garage without a key card. I grabbed my binoculars from the passenger seat. My hands were shaking slightly, not from age but from rage. I focused the lenses on the main entrance of the building. The lobby was all glass, brightly lit, like a fishbowl. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I started to wonder if I had lost him, if he had just gone up to an apartment and stayed there. But then the glass doors slid open. Brad walked out. He wasn't alone. Walking next to him was a woman. She was white, tall, and blonde. She looked to be about 30 years younger than me, maybe in her late 20s. She was wearing a silk dress that shimmered under the streetlights, and she was laughing at something Brad said. She looked expensive. Her hair was perfect, her skin was glowing, and she moved with the confidence of a woman who knows she is taken care of. But it wasn't the woman that made my breath stop in my throat. It was who was running ahead of them. A little boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He had curly hair and was bouncing with energy, holding a toy airplane in his hand. He ran toward the black SUV that Brad had just pulled around to the curb. "Daddy, look. It flies." The word floated across the quiet street and hit me like a physical blow. Daddy. I watched through the binoculars as Brad scooped the boy up. The stiff, formal man who shook my hand like a stranger just hours ago was gone. In his place was a father beaming with pride. He spun the boy around and kissed his cheek. It was a scene of perfect domestic happiness, a scene that should have made anyone smile. But all I could see was the coat the boy was wearing. I zoomed in. It was a puffy down jacket, navy blue with a distinct red and white logo on the sleeve. Montclair. I know brands. Tiana used to love fashion magazines. That jacket cost at least $500, maybe $6. My mind flashed back to Maya's feet. The canvas sneakers with the peeling sole, the hole near her pinky toe, the way she tried to hide them under the chair. Brad had told me last week that he couldn't afford to send Maya to the science summer camp she wanted. He said money was tight. He said the market was down. He said every penny was going to the mortgage. The science camp cost $400. This little boy was wearing Maya's summer camp on his back. I lowered the binoculars and felt bile rise in my throat. I looked at the woman again. She was leaning against the car, watching them with a soft smile. She looked at Brad with adoration. She didn't look like a mistress hiding in the shadows. She looked like a wife. I started doing the math. It is a curse of my profession. I always do the math. The boy is 5 years old, give or take a few months. That means he was conceived nearly 6 years ago. Tiana died 7 years ago. That means Brad waited less than 2 years. Less than 24 months after burying my daughter before he started this new life, before he got this woman pregnant. I thought about those first few years after Tiana passed. I remember sitting with Brad in his kitchen while he cried into his whiskey, telling me how he would never love again, telling me how lonely he was. I remember writing him extra checks during those years thinking I was helping a broken man get back on his feet. I wasn't funding his recovery. I was funding his replacement family. I was paying for this woman's silk dress. I was paying for that boy's designer jacket. I was paying for the gas in that SUV. And meanwhile, my granddaughter Tiana's flesh and blood was walking around in rags, living in fear and being told there was no money. I wanted to start the car. I wanted to drive across the street and ram my Ford right into the side of that SUV. I wanted to get out and shatter that perfect family portrait with my tire iron. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. But I didn't move. I sat there frozen by a cold, calculating fury. If I went over there now, I would go to jail. I would be the crazy old black man attacking a respectable white family. Brad would get a restraining order. I would lose access to Maya forever. And Maya would be left alone in that house with a father who stole from her. No. That was the emotional play. I needed the strategic play. I picked up my digital camera. It was an old Canon I used for birdwatching, but it had a powerful zoom lens. I rested it on the steering wheel to steady my hands. Click. I got a clear shot of Brad holding the boy. Click. I got a shot of the woman kissing Brad on the cheek as he put the boy in the car seat. Click. I got a shot of the license plate on the silver sedan the woman had walked toward before changing her mind and getting into Brad's car. It was a Mercedes. Of course it was. I documented everything. The time, the location, the faces, the affection. They got into the SUV and drove off, probably heading to a restaurant where the menu didn't have prices listed. I didn't follow them. I had seen enough. I had what we used to call in the audit division material evidence of fraud. I sat in the dark for a long time after they left. My coffee was cold now, but I drank it anyway just to wash the taste of bile from my mouth. Maya knew. That was the thought that hurt the most. A 13-year-old girl shouldn't have to carry a secret this heavy. She shouldn't have to protect her grandfather from the truth. She was trying to save me money while her own father was robbing her blind. I started the engine. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The sadness had evaporated, leaving only a hard, crystallized resolve. I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past me, but I didn't see them. I was already building a file in my head. Asset tracing, forensic accounting, custody statutes. Brad thought he was smart. He thought because he was young and white and successful, he could outsmart an old retired civil servant. He thought I was just a walking checkbook, a senile old man who believed whatever story he spun. He forgot one thing. You never lie to the man who checks the books. I pulled into my driveway and walked into my empty house. It was quiet. It had been quiet for too long. I walked over to the mantelpiece where a photo of Tiana sat. She was smiling, wearing her graduation cap. She looked so full of hope. I picked up the frame and traced her face with my thumb. "I am sorry, baby girl," I whispered into the silence. I was sleeping at the wheel. I let the fox into the hen house and I gave him the keys. I set the picture down. But I am awake now. I went to my desk and pulled out a fresh yellow legal pad. I uncapped my pen. I didn't write a diary entry this time. I wrote a list. Item 1. Confirm ownership of the Meridian apartment. Item 2. Run the plates on the Mercedes. Item 3. Call Cohen in the morning. I looked at the clock. It was past midnight. The new day had started. And for Brad Sterling, it was the beginning of the end. He just didn't know it yet. I turned off the desk lamp, but I didn't go to sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the house settle, plotting the destruction of the man who dared to steal my granddaughter's future. The audit had officially begun. The sun rose over my house the next morning, but it brought no warmth. I sat at my heavy mahogany desk, the same desk where I used to review tax audits for the largest corporations in the state. In front of me lay my checkbook. It was time to set the trap. A trap is not about force, it is about leverage. It is about using your enemy's greatest weakness against him. And Brad Sterling's weakness was greed. He was so hungry for money that he wouldn't look at the bait before swallowing the hook. I uncapped my fountain pen. I dated the check for October 13th. I wrote the name Bradley Sterling in the payee line, then I wrote the amount. $40,000 and 0 cents. My hand didn't shake. This wasn't a gift anymore. It was evidence. Then came the most important part. The memo line. Usually I just wrote gift or for Maya, but today I wrote something very specific. I wrote education support pursuant to 2018 verbal trust agreement. It looked like legal jargon. To a greedy man, it would look like nothing more than an old man being pedantic. But in the eyes of the law, depositing a check with that memo line is an acknowledgement of the contract. By cashing this check, Brad was admitting that this money was not for him. It was legally bound to Maya's education. I put the check in an envelope. I didn't mail it. I wanted to see his face when he took it. I drove to his office. It was a glass box in the downtown district, full of people wearing suits that cost more than their cars. Brad came out into the lobby. He looked tired, but when he saw the envelope, his eyes lit up. "Sorry about the rush yesterday, Thaddeus," he said, reaching for the envelope. "You know how birthdays are. Chaotic." I held on to the envelope for a second longer than necessary, forcing him to tug at it. "Just make sure this goes to her tuition, Brad. St. Jude's Academy is not cheap." Brad laughed a hollow sound. "Don't worry, Thaddeus. Every penny goes to her future. You are a good grandfather." He took the envelope and practically ran back to his office. I walked out to my car and checked my banking app. 2 hours later, the notification popped up. Check number 405 has been deposited. He had taken the bait. The trap was set. Now I needed to see the damage he had done. I drove to St. Jude's Academy. It is a prestigious private school on the north side of the city. Brick buildings, ivy growing on the walls, and a security guard who salutes you at the gate. This was where Tiana had wanted Maya to go. She made me promise. "Dad," she had said on her deathbed, "make sure Maya gets the education I never had." I walked into the administration office. It smelled of floor wax and old money. The receptionist was a woman in her 50s wearing pearls. "Good afternoon," I said, putting on my best harmless grandfather smile. "I am Thaddeus King, Maya Sterling's grandfather. I just wanted to drop off her permission slip for the winter field trip. I think her father forgot to sign it." The receptionist smiled and typed into her computer. Sterling. Maya Sterling." Her frowning face stopped my heart. She typed again, harder this time. "Mr. King, I am afraid I don't see a Maya Sterling in our active student registry." I gripped the edge of the counter. "That is impossible. She has been going here since kindergarten. I pay the tuition myself." The woman turned the screen toward me. "I see her file here, Mr. King, but she was withdrawn 6 months ago. March 12th to be exact. The reason listed was financial relocation. Withdrawn." The word hung in the air like smoke. 6 months. For half a year I had been sending checks paying for a school my granddaughter didn't even attend. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Where did he transfer her?" The receptionist looked at the notes. The transfer request was sent to Lincoln High School. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lincoln High. That wasn't a school. It was a holding cell for children the system had given up on. It was on the other side of the city in a district plagued by gangs and drugs. It was a place with metal detectors at the doors and police officers in the hallways. I had one more question. A question an auditor always asks. "The tuition," I said. "I paid for the full year in advance. What happened to the refund?" The receptionist clicked a few more keys. "Yes, here it is. Since the withdrawal happened before the spring semester, a refund of $12,000 was issued. Issued to whom? To the custodial parent, Mr. Bradley Sterling. It was wired to a Chase account ending in 4492. I closed my eyes. That wasn't the account for Maya's expenses. That was Brad's personal account. I knew the number because I had helped him set it up years ago. He had pulled his daughter out of a safe, nurturing environment, threw her into a dangerous public school, and pocketed the refund to spend on his mistress and his secret son. I thanked the receptionist and walked out. I felt heavy, not physically but spiritually. The weight of my own stupidity was crushing me. I had let this happen. I got back in my car and drove to Lincoln High. I needed to see it. I needed to see the reality of my granddaughter's life. The drive took 40 minutes. The scenery changed from manicured lawns to cracked pavement and liquor stores with bars on the windows. I pulled up across the street from the high school. It was dismissal time. A bell rang and a sea of students poured out. There was shouting, pushing. I saw a fight break out near the steps within seconds. A security guard rushed over, pepper spray in hand. And then I saw her. Maya walked out of the side door. She wasn't wearing this plaid skirt and blazer of St. Jude's. She was wearing jeans and an oversized gray hoodie. She had her head down, clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield. She walked quickly, hugging the wall, trying to make herself invisible. She looked terrified. A group of older boys were leaning against the fence, smoking. As Maya passed, one of them reached out and grabbed her backpack strap. She flinched, pulling away violently, and started to run. The boys laughed. I reached for the door handle, ready to sprint across the street, but I stopped myself. If I intervened now, if I caused a scene, Brad would use it against me in court. He would say I was unstable. He would say I was endangering her. He would take her away and hide her where I could never find her. I had to play the long game. I had to kill the snake, not just scare it. I watched my granddaughter run to the bus stop and get on a crowded city bus. A 13-year-old girl riding public transit alone in this neighborhood, while her father drove a Mercedes and his secret son wore a $500 jacket. The rage inside me was no longer hot. It had turned into something else. It was cold, hard steel. It was the feeling I used to get right before I signed a seizure order for a tax cheat's assets. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Cohen Law Firm, a voice answered. Put Saul on the phone, I said. Tell him it is Thaddeus. Tell him it is an emergency. A moment later, a gravelly voice came on the line. Thaddeus, I haven't heard from you since the funeral. Is everything all right? No, Saul. Everything is wrong. But I am about to fix it. I watched the school bus disappear around the corner. Did the check clear? I asked. I am looking at the notification right now, Saul said. 40,000. It cleared 30 minutes ago. Good, I said. And the memo line. Did you see a copy of the check? Yes, Saul replied, pursuant to 2018 trust. Clever Thaddeus. Very clever. He accepted the terms when he took the money. I want you to execute Clause 4. I said, my voice flat. There was a silence on the other end. Clause 4. Thaddeus, that is the nuclear option. If we do that, we freeze everything. His personal accounts, his business assets, the house. We trigger a forensic audit of every dime he has touched in the last 7 years. It will destroy his credit. It will destroy his reputation. He won't be able to buy a pack of gum without a judge's permission. Are you sure you want to go this far? I looked at the peeling paint of Lincoln High. I remembered the fear in Maya's eyes. I remembered the designer jacket on the secret son. He stole her education, Saul. He stole her future to buy luxury for himself. He didn't just break the trust, he spat on my daughter's grave. I started the engine of my car. Clause 4, Saul. Burn it all down. I want to see every transaction. I want to know where every dollar of my $280,000 went, and get a private investigator to find out who owns the apartment at the Meridian. I will draw up the papers tonight, Saul said. We file at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thaddeus, be careful. When a rat is cornered, it bites. Let him bite, I said, looking at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I used to hunt sharks for the government. A rat doesn't scare me. I hung up the phone. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows over the broken streets. I wasn't just a grandfather anymore. I was the auditor, and Bradley Sterling's books were about to be closed, permanently. The silence in my house used to be peaceful. It was a library silence full of memories and dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. But after I left Lincoln High School, that silence felt heavy. It felt like the calm before a hurricane. I sat in my armchair with a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. I was waiting. In my line of work, you learn that action always breeds reaction. I had poked the bear, and now the bear was going to roar. The phone rang at 4:15. It wasn't the polite chirping ringtone I set for friends. It was the harsh mechanical buzz of the landline. I knew who it was before I picked it up. I didn't say hello. I just lifted the receiver and breathed. You went to her school. It wasn't a question. Brad's voice was tight, high-pitched, and vibrating with a mix of fear and fury. He didn't sound like the slick real estate agent anymore. He sounded like a cornered animal. I went to the school I pay for Brad, I said calmly. Or at least the school I thought I was paying for. Don't you play games with me, Thaddeus, Brad shouted. The receptionist called me. She said you were confusing the staff. She said you were rambling about tuitions and refunds and making a scene. She said you looked disoriented. I closed my eyes. There it was, the narrative. He wasn't just defending himself, he was rewriting reality. He was taking my discovery of his theft and turning it into a symptom of my decline. I was perfectly clear, Brad, I said, keeping my voice steady. I saw the withdrawal papers. I saw the refund to your personal account. I saw Maya getting on a city bus in a neighborhood where the crime rate is 3 times the national average. You are confused. Brad cut me off, his voice dripping with mock pity. You are getting old, Thaddeus. Your mind isn't what it used to be. We have all noticed it. You forget things. You get agitated. You imagine conspiracies. I gripped the phone cord. I am not imagining your Mercedes, Brad. I am not imagining the boy in the Montclair jacket. There was a silence on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. Then his voice dropped to a cold whisper. You are stalking me now. Is that it? You are stalking a family man. This is exactly what I am talking about. You are becoming dangerous, Thaddeus. You are obsessed. I am not obsessed, I said. I am auditing, and you are failing. Listen to me and listen, good old man, Brad hissed. You stay away from Maya. You stay away from her school. You stay away from my house. If you come within 500 feet of my daughter again, I will have the police pick you up. And they won't take you to jail. They will take you to the psych ward where you belong. He hung up. The dial tone hummed in my ear. I set the receiver down gently. My hand was trembling not from fear but from the sheer effort of holding back my rage. He was using the oldest weapon in the book against a black man in America. He was painting me as the aggressor, the crazy, angry threat. And he was using my age to invalidate my witness. If I spoke the truth, he would call it dementia. If I showed anger, he would call it violence. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My mind was sharp. I could recite the tax code from 1998 to present day. I wasn't crazy, but I knew how the system worked. A white businessman in a suit versus a retired black man with a history of grief. I knew who the judge would believe if I didn't have hard evidence. Night fell. I couldn't eat. I paced the floor of my living room. I looked at the photos of Tiana on the mantel. In every picture she was smiling. She had loved Brad so much. She had been so blind. And because I loved her, I had chosen to be blind too. At 9 o'clock, the burner phone I kept in my desk drawer buzzed. I scrambled for it. Only one person had this number. Maya. I answered it on the first ring. Grandpa. Her voice was barely a squeak. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet. In the background, I could hear music, loud, upbeat jazz, and laughter. A woman's laughter. I am here, baby girl, I whispered. Are you okay? She is here. Grandpa Maya sobbed. She is here with her bags. Who? The lady. The blonde lady. Jessica. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just stealing money anymore. He was moving in for the kill. Brad said she is going to live here now, Maya whispered. He said I have to be nice to her. He said she is going to be a mother figure for me. I felt a wave of nausea. A mother figure. Tiana had been dead 7 years, but her presence was still in that house. Her piano was in the living room. Her paintings were in the hallway. They are changing Mom's room. Grandpa, what did you say? Maya was crying harder now, gasping for breath. They are in Mom's studio. Jessica said the light is good for a nursery. They are putting the boy in there. They are taking down Mom's paintings. Grandpa, please come get me. Please. I don't want to be here. I stood up. My instinct was to grab my keys, to drive over there and tear that door off its hinges, to throw Brad through a window and drag that woman out by her expensive hair. But I stopped. I heard Brad's voice in my head. You are dangerous. You are unstable? If I went there tonight while they were moving in, I would be arresting. I would be charged with trespassing and assault, and Brad would have his proof. See, Judge, he is violent. He is crazy. I took a deep breath, forcing the air into my lungs. Maya, listen to me, I said, my voice cracking. I can't come tonight. If I come tonight, they will take me away and I won't be able to help you anymore. But I hate it here, she cried. I know, baby, I know. But we have to be smart. We have to be soldiers. Can you be a soldier for me? There was a sniffle. Then a small voice. Yes. I need you to do something very hard, I said. I need you to stay in your room. Lock the door if you can. Don't fight them. Don't scream. Just watch. And if you can, record. Can you do that? I think so. You are brave, Maya. You are strong like your mother. We are going to fix this. I promise you on my life, we are going to fix this. But not tonight. Tonight we have to let them think they have won. I heard a door slam on her end. Then Brad's voice muffled through the wall. Maya, get down here. Jessica wants to say goodnight. I have to go, she whispered. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too. The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time. I imagined strangers touching Tiana's paintings. I imagined that little boy sleeping in the room where my daughter used to create art. It felt like a violation. It felt like they were killing her all over again. The next morning, the knock on the door came at 8 a.m. It wasn't a friend. It was a man in a cheap brown suit holding a tablet and a thick envelope. Thaddeus King, he asked without looking up. Yes, you have been served. He thrust the envelope into my hand and walked away before I could speak. I opened it on the porch. The morning air was crisp, but the paper in my hand felt hot. It was a court order from the family court of the state. Plaintiff Bradley Sterling. Defendant Thaddeus King. I skipped the legal header and went straight to the motion. Emergency motion for temporary restraining order and modification of grandparent visitation. I read the affidavit attached. It was a work of fiction so twisted it made my head spin. Mr. King has shown increasing signs of dementia and aggression since the death of his daughter. He has been seen loitering outside the minor child's school. He has made erratic financial demands. He has threatened the plaintiff and his partner. The plaintiff fears for the safety of his daughter and requests that all visitation rights be suspended immediately pending a psychiatric evaluation. There it was. He hadn't just threatened, he had pulled the trigger. He was suing me to keep me away from the crime scene. He wanted to strip me of my rights so he could finish erasing my daughter and spending my money in peace. He was using the court system as a shield for his greed. I looked at the signature at the bottom, Bradley Sterling. It was signed with a flourish, the signature of a man who thinks he has already won. I walked back into the house and walked straight to my office. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I picked up the phone and dialed Saul Cohen. He answered on the second ring. Did you file the papers? Thaddeus, he asked. I am looking at a restraining order, Saul. I said, my voice flat. He beat us to the punch. He is claiming I have dementia. He wants a psych eval. Saul swore loudly. I knew he would try this. It is the standard playbook for gaslighting narcissists. He wants to discredit the witness. He is moving the mistress in Saul into Tiana's studio. The line was silent for a moment. Then Saul's voice came back lower and more dangerous. Okay, the gloves are off. He wants to play dirty. We will play scorched earth. Bring that restraining order to my office. And bring every check stub, every bank statement, and that little black notebook of yours. I am on my way, I said. And Thaddeus Saul added, don't look at this as a defeat. This is a mistake, a massive mistake. How so? Because now he has put it on the record, Saul said. He has invited the court into his life. He thinks the judge is only going to look at you. But once we open the doors of that courtroom, we are going to make sure the judge looks at everything. He just invited the vampire into his house thinking it was a guest. I hung up the phone. I looked at the restraining order one last time. Plaintiff Bradley Sterling. You are right, Brad, I said to the empty room. I am dangerous. But not because I am crazy. I am dangerous because I am the only one who knows exactly what you are worth. And I am about to make sure your value drops to zero. I grabbed my coat and my files. The sadness was gone. The hesitation was gone. The grandfather was gone. The auditor was going to work. The restraining order sat on my desk like a paperweight made of lead. A younger man might have stared at it in despair. A weaker man might have let the tears come. But I am not young. And after 7 years of grieving my daughter, I have no tears left to shed for myself. I only have resolve. Brad Sterling thought this piece of paper was a wall. He thought it would keep me out. He thought it would stop me from seeing the truth. But he forgot what I did for a living. I didn't need to be physically present to audit a man. I didn't need to stand on his front lawn to see inside his house. I needed paper. I went down to my basement. It is a dry, cool place filled with filing cabinets that hold the history of my life. Most people throw away old documents after 7 years. That is what the IRS recommends. But I never threw away anything. Information is the only currency that never devaluates. I walked to the gray metal cabinet in the corner, the one labeled Property and Assets 2010 to 2020. My joints popped as I knelt down, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt the hum of the hunt. I was looking for one specific file, the purchase agreement for the house on Elm Street. I remembered the day we bought it. Tiana was pregnant with Maya. She was glowing, Brad was there too, smiling that salesman's smile, talking about curb appeal and resale value. I was writing the check for the down payment. It was a massive check, $200,000. It was my life savings and Beatrice's retirement fund combined. Beatrice, my wife. God rest her soul, she was smarter than me. She was the one who whispered in my ear at the closing table. "Thaddeus," she said, her hand gripping my knee under the table. "Don't put the deed in both their names." I don't trust his smile. It is too wide. I pulled the yellowed folder from the cabinet. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. I opened it and spread the documents out on the concrete floor. There it was, the deed of trust. I adjusted my glasses and began to read. I read the standard clauses about easements and property lines. I read the mortgage terms, and then I found it. Clause 14, Section B. The clause Beatrice had insisted on. The clause Brad had glossed over because he was too busy counting the money in his head. The property is granted to the Tiana King Sterling Trust. Bradley Sterling holds a life estate interest only subject to continuous occupancy as the primary guardian of the minor child. Upon the death of Tiana King Sterling, the life estate remains valid solely for the benefit of the minor child. Any attempt to sell, lease, or leverage the property against the interest of the minor child voids the life estate immediately. I sat back on my heels and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Brad didn't own the house. He never did. He was a tenant with a very specific lease. He could live there as long as he was taking care of Maya. But the moment he tried to sell it or the moment he stopped acting in Maya's best interest, his right to the property evaporated. He was sitting in a house that belonged to my granddaughter, thinking he was the king of the castle. But he was just a squatter waiting to be evicted. This was good, this was powerful, but it wasn't enough. A clause in a contract is just words until you can prove it has been violated. I needed proof of his intent. I needed to know what he was planning before he did it. I needed to be inside his head. I couldn't go near him. The restraining order made sure of that. But I didn't need to go near him to hear him. I went back upstairs and picked up the phone. I called a number that wasn't in my contacts list. It was a number memorized from years ago. "Vince," I said when the line clicked open. "It is Thaddeus. I have a job for you." Vince was a private investigator who used to work fraud cases with me. He didn't ask questions. He just asked for an address and a fee. "I need a listening device," I said. "A high-quality long-range transmitter." "Where do you want it planted?" Vince asked, his voice raspy from years of smoking. "In a 2021 Mercedes GLS SUV, black. License plate number Charlie Victor, 692. There was a pause. "That is risky, Thaddeus. Bugging a private vehicle requires a warrant. If you get caught, you are looking at felony wiretapping." I smiled at the phone. It was a cold, tight smile. "It is not a private vehicle, Vince. Check the registration." I heard the clicking of keys on a keyboard. Vince was running the plate. "Sterling and King Real Estate, LLC," Vince read aloud. "Exactly," I said. "It is a company car. And if you check the articles of incorporation for Sterling and King, you will see that Thaddeus King holds a 5% stake in the company. I am a silent partner. That car is 5% mine. And as a shareholder, I have the right to audit company assets to ensure they are not being misused." Vince laughed, a dry barking sound. "You are a scary man, Thaddeus. You really are. You found the loophole." "I didn't find it," I said. "I built it. When can you do it?" "Tonight." The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my home office surrounded by darkness. On my desk was a receiver connected to a laptop. I was wearing noise-canceling headphones. The screen showed a flat green line, static. I listened to Brad drive to work. I listened to him listening to sports radio. I listened to him ordering a latte at the drive-thru. It was mundane. It was boring. But in my profession, patience is not a virtue. It is a requirement. You have to sift through mountains of dirt to find the nugget of gold. Then at 7 p.m. on Friday night, the green line spiked. The car door opened. I heard the rustle of fabric. I heard the engine start. "Hey, baby," a voice said. It was Brad. His voice was smooth, affectionate. "Hey, honey." It was Jessica, the mistress. I leaned forward, pressing the headphones tighter to my ears. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Where are we going?" Jessica asked. Her voice sounded pouty. "I am tired of sneaking around Brad. When is this going to be over?" "Soon, babe, soon," Brad said. The car accelerated. I could hear the hum of the tires on the asphalt. "I am serious," Jessica said. That old man came to the house today. Well, not to the house, but he sent a process server. I saw the papers on the counter. He is suing you, isn't he? He is trying, Brad said with a scoff. He is a senile old fool. He thinks he can scare me. He doesn't know who he is dealing with. I have the best lawyers in the city. But what about the kid? Jessica asked. Maya. She stares at me. It is creepy, Brad. She looks just like her mother. I can't live in that house with her watching me all the time. It is like living with a ghost. I gripped the edge of my desk. My knuckles turned white. Hearing her talk about my granddaughter like she was a nuisance and insect to be swatted away made my blood boil. Don't worry about the brat, Brad said. I froze. The brat. That was what he called his daughter. I have a plan. Brad continued, his voice dropping lower, conspiring. Once the restraining order is permanent and the old man is out of the picture, I am shipping her off. Shipping her off where Jessica asked. Boarding school, Brad said. There is a place upstate, St. Mary's or something. It is for troubled youth. I will tell the court she is acting out, that she is grieving and needs professional help. I will dump her there, and we won't have to see her until she is 18. There was a silence in the car. Then Jessica giggled. You are bad. I am practical, Brad said. And once she is gone, we sell the house. You can do that, Jessica asked. Watch me, Brad said. I will liquidate everything. The house, the trust fund, the investments, all of it. The market is peaking right now. We walk away with maybe $2 million cash. Then we take Leo and we go. Go where? Europe, Brad said. Italy, maybe. Or France. Somewhere with no extradition treaties, just in case. But mostly somewhere where Thaddeus King can never find us. We will live like kings, babe. Just you, me, and our son. I pressed the record button on my laptop. I watched the digital counter tick upward, saving every word, every syllable of his betrayal. What about the old man? Jessica asked. Won't he fight you? Let him fight. Brad laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. He is 73 years old. He has a heart condition. The stress of the trial will probably kill him before we even get to a verdict. And if it doesn't, I will just drag it out until he runs out of money. He is bleeding cash trying to save that girl. I am counting on him dying, Thaddeus. I am counting on it. I took off the headphones. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. He wasn't just a thief. He was a monster. He was planning to discard my granddaughter like trash. He was planning to steal her inheritance. And he was banking on my death to make it happen. I looked at the waveform on the screen. It was a jagged green line. To anyone else, it looked like noise. To me, it looked like a confession. I saved the file. I named it Exhibit A. Then I saved a backup copy to a cloud server and another to a USB drive. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The night was dark, but my vision had never been clearer. Brad thought I was weak. He thought I was dying. He thought he was playing a game against a helpless old man. He was wrong. I wasn't dying. I was just getting started. I picked up the phone and dialed Saul Cohen again. It was late, almost midnight, but I knew he would answer. Thaddeus. Saul said, his voice groggy. It is midnight. Wake up, Saul, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I have the smoking gun. What do you mean? I have him on tape, I said. I have him conspiring to defraud the trust. I have him admitting to premeditated abandonment of a minor. And I have him discussing flight to avoid prosecution. Saul was silent for a moment. Then I heard the rustle of bedsheets. Bring it in, he said. Bring it in first thing in the morning. No, Saul, I said. We are not waiting for morning. I am coming over now. And call the district attorney. Call your friend in the fraud division, Thaddeus. Saul warned. We need to follow procedure. Screw procedure, I said. He is planning to take her out of the state. This is no longer a civil dispute. This is kidnapping conspiracy. I am coming over, Saul. And tell the DA to bring handcuffs. I hung up the phone. I went to the closet and pulled out my old suit, the gray one I used to wear for federal court hearings. I put it on. I tied my tie with steady hands. I looked in the mirror. The tired, grieving grandfather was gone. The man staring back at me was the auditor, the man who brought down corrupt CEOs and money launderers, the man who never lost a case. I grabbed the USB drive. I walked out to my car. The engine roared to life. I wasn't just driving to a lawyer's office. I was driving to war. And for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't afraid. I was the one to be feared. The family court building on 4th Street is a place where love goes to die and where lies are dressed up in expensive suits. I walked in at 8:45 in the morning. I was wearing my gray suit, the one I used to wear when I testified against tax evaders in federal court. It was clean and pressed, but it was 10 years old. Beside me, Saul Cohen walked with a limp, his briefcase bulging with files. He looked like what he was, a street fighter who had survived too many rounds. We sat on the left side of the courtroom, the defendant's side. 5 minutes later, the doors opened, and Bradley Sterling made his entrance. And it was an entrance. He wasn't wearing the flashy Italian loafers today. He was wearing a modest navy blue suit, a white shirt, and a tie that was a somber shade of maroon. He looked like the picture of a grieving, hard-working father. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes forward, his face set in a mask of pained reluctance. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 lawyers. I recognized the lead counsel immediately, Harrison Thorne. He was one of the most expensive family law attorneys in the city. His retainer alone cost more than most people make in a year. Brad was paying for him with my money, with the money I had sent for Maya's education. The bailiff called out, "All rise." Judge Marilyn Vance walked in. She looked tired. She had a stack of files on her desk that was 2 feet high. She didn't want the truth, she wanted efficiency. She wanted to clear her docket before lunch. Thorne stood up first. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the center of the room. He spoke with a voice that was smooth like velvet but toxic like mercury. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today with a heavy heart. My client, Mr. Sterling, has the utmost respect for Mr. King. We acknowledge his loss. Losing a daughter is a tragedy that no parent should have to endure." I gripped the armrest of my chair. He was starting with sympathy. It was the classic opening move. Make yourself look reasonable before you plunge the knife in. However, Thorne continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Mr. Sterling's primary duty is to protect his 13-year-old daughter, Maya, and unfortunately, in recent months, Mr. King's behavior has become concerning." He turned and looked at me. It wasn't a look of hatred. It was a look of pity, a look that said, "Poor old man, he doesn't know what he is doing." "We have submitted affidavits detailing erratic behavior," Thorne said. "Unannounced visits to the school that terrified the staff. Aggressive confrontations in front of the minor child. Obsessive tracking of my client's movements. And most recently, vague threats regarding finances that suggest a detachment from reality." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Your Honor, Mr. King is 73 years old. We believe his grief combined with his advanced age has manifested as paranoia. He is confusing the past with the present. He sees enemies where there are none. And frankly, Mr. Sterling is terrified. He is a single father trying to raise a teenage girl, and having a large, angry man showing up at his home and school demanding money and shouting accusations is simply not a safe environment for Maya. Large, angry. He didn't say the word black. He didn't have to. It was coded in the language. He was painting a picture for the judge. A picture of a scary, senile black man harassing a nice, respectable white family. Judge Vance looked at me over her glasses. Her eyes lingered on my hands, which were clenched into fists on the table. I forced myself to open them. I forced myself to sit still. "Mr. Cohen, do you have a response?" she asked. Saul stood up. He didn't have Thorne's polish. He had gravel in his voice. "Your Honor, this is a smokescreen, Mr. King is a retired federal auditor with a distinguished 30-year career. He is not senile, he is suspicious, and he has reason to be. We have evidence that Mr. Sterling has misappropriated funds intended for the grandchild. Mr. King went to the school because he discovered the child had been withdrawn without his knowledge. That is not paranoia, Your Honor. That is due diligence." Thorne jumped up. "Objection. This hearing is about immediate safety, not about accounting. If Mr. King wants to dispute finances, he can file a civil suit. But right now we have a 13-year-old girl who is afraid of her grandfather. We have a school administration that has banned him from the premises. We are asking for a temporary restraining order to cool the temperature, to ensure safety while we sort this out." The judge sighed and rubbed her temples. She looked at the clock. It was 9:15. She had 12 more cases to hear. "Mr. King," she said, addressing me directly, "I understand your concerns about your granddaughter's education, but you cannot simply show up at a school and demand records. You cannot stalk your son-in-law. There are proper channels for these things. But Your Honor," I started to say. Saul put a hand on my arm. He squeezed hard. "Don't speak," his grip said. "Let them win the battle to lose the war. I closed my mouth. I swallowed the rage that tasted like ash. I am granting the temporary restraining order, Judge Vance said, stamping a document. Mr. King, you are to stay 500 feet away from Mr. Sterling, his residence, and the minor child, Maya Sterling. You are to have no contact directly or indirectly. We will review this in 30 days, pending a report from Child Protective Services. 30 days. In 30 days, Brad could sell the house. In 30 days, he could send Maya away. In 30 days, he could disappear. Thank you, Your Honor, Thorne said, bowing his head like a priest. The gavel banged. Next case, the bailiff yelled. It was over in 15 minutes. I had lost my rights to see my own flesh and blood because I was too thorough, because I cared too much. Brad stood up. He shook his lawyer's hand. Then he turned to look at me. The pained expression was gone. The grieving father mask had slipped. In its place was a smirk of pure, unadulterated triumph. I stood up slowly. My knees hurt. I felt every day of my 73 years. Saul was gathering his papers, muttering curses under his breath. We will appeal, Thaddeus Saul whispered. We will file the financial evidence tomorrow. This isn't over. I know, I said quietly. We walked out of the courtroom into the wide marble hallway. It echoed with the sound of footsteps and hushed conversations. Brad was waiting by the water fountain. His lawyer had gone ahead to the elevator. He was alone. He wanted this moment. He wanted to twist the knife. I walked past him, not looking down. Thaddeus, he said. His voice was light, cheerful even. I stopped. I turned slowly to face him. You should have just stayed home, Brad said. You should have just sent the check and watched TV. Now look at you. You can't even see her on Christmas. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. She is better off without you, he whispered. You are depressing her. You remind her of death. We are going to be a happy family now. Me, Jessica, and the kids. We don't need your dark cloud hanging over us. I looked him in the eye. I didn't see a man. I saw a balance sheet full of red ink. I saw a liability that needed to be written off. You won today, Brad, I said, my voice steady, low enough that only he could hear. You got your piece of paper, but paper works both ways. Brad laughed. A short, sharp bark. Are you threatening me again, Thaddeus? Careful, or I will call the bailiff back. I am not threatening you, I said. I am giving you financial advice. You are about to come into a lot of money, or so you think. You think you are going to sell the house. You think you are going to cash out the trust. Brad's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. How did you know about... He started, then stopped. It doesn't matter what you think you know. It is over. I leaned in close. I could see the pores on his skin. I could see the faint trace of fear behind his blue eyes. Be careful how you spend the money, Contrai, I said. Every dollar leaves a trail, and I have been following trails since before you were born. Enjoy your dinner tonight, Brad. It might be the last expensive meal you eat for a long time. Brad stepped back. He straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. He sneered at me. You are pathetic, he spat. It is my money. It is all my money. Tiana is dead. You are irrelevant. And by the time you figure out what I have done, I will be so far away, you will need a telescope to see me. He turned on his heel and walked toward the elevators, his footsteps clicking rhythmically on the marble. He looked like a winner. He walked like a king. I watched him go. Saul walked up beside me. What did he say? Saul asked. He confessed, I said. He just confirmed everything. He thinks it is his money. Saul looked at Brad's retreating figure. So what do we do now? We have to wait 30 days for the hearing. I looked at my watch. It was 10 a.m. The banks were open. The real estate offices were open. No, Saul, I said, buttoning my jacket. We don't wait. He thinks the restraining order is a shield, but he just trapped himself. How? Because now he feels safe, I said. And a man who feels safe makes mistakes. He is going to move fast now. He is going to try to liquidate the assets this week while he thinks I am blocked. We need to be faster. I walked toward the exit, the heavy oak doors swinging open before me. The sun outside was blindingly bright. Call your contact at the forensic accounting firm, I told Saul. and call the sheriff in the county where Tiana is buried." "Why?" the sheriff Saul asked, hurrying to keep up with me. "Because," I said, putting on my sunglasses, "I have a feeling Brad is going to try to sell something that doesn't belong to him. Something even more precious than the house." Saul stopped walking. "You don't mean—" "I mean everything, Saul. He is clearing the decks. We are going to catch him in the act." I walked down the courthouse steps. I had lost the battle in room 302. But the war was just moving to a new battlefield. And on this battlefield I didn't need a judge. I just needed the numbers. And the numbers never lie. The rain that night was not just rain. It was a deluge. It hammered against the shingles of my roof like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be let in. The wind howled through the eaves, rattling the window panes in their frames. It was 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. I should have been asleep. But sleep is a luxury for men who have peace of mind, and I had none. I sat in my kitchen, the only light coming from the small bulb over the stove. On the table in front of me lay the restraining order. I had read it so many times the words had blurred into a meaningless gray smudge. 500 feet. That was the distance the law said I had to keep from my own blood. 500 feet. It might as well have been 5,000 miles. I took a sip of whiskey. It burned going down, but it didn't warm the cold spot in the center of my chest. I was thinking about the bugs I had planted in Brad's car. I hadn't checked the feed tonight. I couldn't bear to hear another conversation about them spending my money or planning their European getaway. I needed a moment of silence. Then I heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a sound distinct from the storm. A rhythmic thumping on the back door. Not a knock. A pounding. My first thought was Brad. Had he come here to gloat? Had he come to enforce his victory with his fists? I stood up, my joints popping in protest. I walked to the back door, my hand instinctively reaching for the heavy iron skillet hanging on the rack. I wasn't going to open the door defenseless. The pounding came again, weaker this time. Then a voice. A voice so small it was almost swallowed by the thunder. "Grandpa." The skillet clattered to the floor. I tore the deadbolt open and threw the door wide. The sight that met me broke my heart into pieces that I knew would never fit back together. Maya stood on the welcome mat. She was soaked to the bone. Her hair was plastered to her skull and water streamed down her face, mixing with tears. She was shivering so violently her teeth were audibly chattering. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin t-shirt and pajama pants that were mud-stained up to the knees. She looked like a ghost that had been dragged through a swamp. "Grandpa," she stammered. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't say a word. I reached out and pulled her inside, slamming the door against the wind. The kitchen was instantly filled with the smell of wet dog and ozone. I grabbed the Afghan from the sofa and wrapped it around her. She was freezing. Her skin was like ice. "I got you, baby girl," I whispered, rubbing her arms vigorously, trying to generate friction heat. "I got you. You are safe now." She collapsed into me, burying her face in my chest. She sobbed. It wasn't the crying of a child who scraped her knee. It was the guttural wailing of a soul that has been pushed past its limit. I guided her to the chair near the radiator. I put the kettle on. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to work. Tea, sugar, blankets, the basics of survival. After 10 minutes, the shivering subsided to a tremble. She held the mug with both hands, staring into the dark liquid. "Tell me," I said softly. Maya took a ragged breath. "She moved in today, Grandpa." "Jessica." "She brought a moving truck." I nodded slowly. I expected that. "She brought boxes into Mom's studio," Maya said. "She told the movers to clear everything out." My stomach clenched. Everything. Mom's easel. Maya continued, tears spilling over again. Her unfinished canvases, her paints, the chair she used to sit in by the window. Jessica called it junk. She said it smelled like turpentine and death. She told them to put it in the dumpster. I closed my eyes. Tiana used to spend hours in that room. It was her sanctuary. Every brushstroke was a piece of her soul. And this woman, this intruder, had thrown it away like garbage. I tried to stop them, Grandpa. I ran out to the dumpster. I tried to pull the canvases out. It was raining. The paint was running. It was like watching her die all over again. I gripped the edge of the table. What did Brad do? Dad stood on the porch, Maya whispered. He was drinking wine. He laughed, Grandpa. He told me to stop being dramatic. He said it was time to move on. He said the room needed to be repurposed for Leo, the secret son. And then what happened, Maya? How did you get here? I yelled at her. Maya said, her voice hardening. I told Jessica she was a witch. I told her she would never be my mother. I told her she was ugly inside and out. Good girl, I thought. Jessica screamed, Maya said. She grabbed my arm. She has long fingernails, Grandpa. She dug them in. She dragged me upstairs and threw me in my room. Then she told Dad to handle me. And how did he handle you? He put a padlock on the door, Maya whispered. On the outside. He said I was grounded until I learned respect. He said I wasn't going to eat until I apologized to his future wife. A padlock. He locked a 13-year-old girl in a room without food because she tried to save her dead mother's belongings. I waited until they went to sleep, Maya said. I opened the window. The trellis is still there, Grandpa. The one you built for the roses. It was slippery because of the rain. I almost fell twice, but I climbed down. I looked at her hands. They were scraped and raw from the rough wood. She had climbed down 2 stories in a thunderstorm and ran 3 miles through the city to get to me. You are brave, Maya, I said. You are the bravest girl I know. I can't go back. Grandpa, she said, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. Please don't make me go back. They hate me. I am just in the way. You are not going back, I said. Not tonight. Not ever, if I can help it. I reached out to adjust the blanket on her shoulder and she flinched. It was a small movement, but I saw it. Show me, I said. What? Your arm. The one she grabbed. Maya hesitated, then slowly pulled down the wet fabric of the blanket. She rolled up the sleeve of her t-shirt. On her upper arm, just above the elbow, were 4 distinct purple marks. They were crescent-shaped. Bruises. Deep, angry, and undeniable. I stared at them. I wasn't looking at my granddaughter's arm anymore. I was looking at Exhibit B. This wasn't discipline. This was assault. I stood up and went to the drawer where I kept the camera, the same camera I used to photograph the Mercedes. I need to take a picture, Maya, I said, keeping my voice clinical. She nodded, understanding. She knew the drill. She was an auditor's granddaughter, after all. I took 5 photos from different angles. I wanted the lighting to show the depth of the bruising. I wanted the judge to see exactly how hard Jessica had squeezed. I put the camera away. Now, I said, sit back, drink your tea. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The rain was still falling, but the wind had died down. It was quiet. Too quiet. If Maya had escaped 2 hours ago, Brad would have found the empty room by now. He would have seen the open window. He would know exactly where she went, and he wouldn't come alone. He was too cowardly for that. He had a restraining order. He had the law on his side. He would use it as a weapon. I didn't have to wait long. 3 minutes later, the darkness of the street was shattered by flashing lights. Blue and red strobes cut through the rain, washing my living room walls in the colors of authority. 1 car, 2 cars, 3. They pulled up to the curb, screeching to a halt. Maya gasped and jumped up from the chair. Grandpa, the police. Did Dad call the police on me? No, baby, I said, turning to face her. He didn't call them on you. He called them on me. I walked over to her and placed my hands on her shoulders. Listen to me very carefully. You are going to tell the truth. Only the truth. You show them your arm. You tell them about the padlock. You tell them about the painting in the rain. Do not lie to protect me. Do not lie to protect yourself. The truth is our only shield. Do you understand? She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I heard car doors slam. I heard boots splashing on the pavement. I heard the crackle of a radio. Open up! Police, a voice shouted. I walked to the front door. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked tired. I looked old. But I didn't look guilty. I opened the door. 3 officers stood there, hands on their holsters. Behind them, standing by the hood of the patrol car under an umbrella held by an officer, was Brad. He was wearing a raincoat. He looked frantic. He was playing the role of his life. There she is, he shouted, pointing at Maya, who was peeking from behind me. Thank God. He kidnapped her. I told you he would. He lured her out of her window. He is sick. Grab him. Officer Miller stepped forward. I knew Miller. He was a good man, a veteran on the force. He looked uncomfortable. Mr. King, he said, his hand resting on his taser but not drawing it. We have a report of a custodial interference in violation of a restraining order. Mr. Sterling says you abducted his daughter. I looked at Miller, then I looked past him at Brad. Abducted, I said, my voice calm, carrying over the sound of the rain. She ran 3 miles in a storm, Miller. Look at her feet. She is barefoot. Miller looked down. Maya's feet were muddy and bleeding slightly. She came to me for sanctuary, I said, because she was locked in a room and assaulted. Liar, Brad screamed from the street. He is brainwashing her. Arrest him. The court order says 500 feet. He is violating the order right now. Miller looked at me. Thaddeus, you know the law. If she is here and you open the door, you are in violation. I have to take you in. I know, I said. I held out my wrists. Grandpa? No, Maya screamed, running forward. I turned to her. Stay here, Maya. Tell Officer Miller about the arm. Show him the arm. Miller looked at Maya. What arm? Show him, I commanded. Maya rolled up her sleeve. The police flashlight beam hit the purple bruises. Miller's eyes widened. He looked back at the street where Brad was standing. That changes things, Miller muttered. He didn't handcuff me. Not yet. We need to sort this out at the station, Miller said. Thaddeus, you have to come. Maya, we will need to take you to a crisis center temporarily until Child Services can interview you. We can't leave you here, and we certainly can't send you back there with that mark on you. That is exactly what I want, I said. Get her away from that house, Miller. Document everything. I stepped out onto the porch. The rain soaked my shirt instantly. I walked down the path toward the squad car. As I passed Brad, he stepped forward, his face twisted in a sneer. Enjoy prison, old man, he whispered. You just played right into my hands. Now I have full custody. I stopped. I looked at him. You don't have custody, Brad, I said. You have an investigation, and you just invited the police to look at your daughter's body. You should have kept the door locked better. Brad's face paled. I got into the back of the police car. The door slammed shut. The mesh screen separated me from the world. As we drove away, I looked back. I saw Miller putting a blanket around Maya. I saw another officer walking toward Brad, not with a handshake, but with a notepad. I was going to jail tonight. I knew that. But for the first time in a long time, my granddaughter was safe. She was out of that house. She was in the system. And the system, for all its flaws, listens to evidence. I sat back against the hard plastic seat. Round 2, Brad, I thought. And this time I am not fighting with checks. I am fighting with scars. The back of a police cruiser is a cage designed to strip a man of his dignity. The hard plastic seat, the mesh screen, the smell of stale sweat and disinfectant. It is meant to make you feel small. But as I sat there watching the rain streak against the glass, I didn't feel small. I felt like a chess player who had just sacrificed a knight to save the queen. Officer Miller opened the door. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Mr. King, he said, his voice lower than before. I spoke to the sergeant. Given the allegations and the visible injuries on the child, we are not going to book you tonight. We are going to document the scene inside. I nodded and stepped out. My knees cracked, but I stood tall. Brad was standing by his car, looking like a man who had just won the lottery. He saw me get out, and his smile faltered. Why isn't he in handcuffs? Brad shouted, stepping forward. Officer, he violated a court order. This is arrestable. Miller held up a hand. Step back, Mr. Sterling. This is an active investigation. Stay by your vehicle. We walked back into my house. Maya was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in the blanket, shaking not from cold anymore, but from the adrenaline crash. Miller took out his notepad. Okay, Thaddeus, you said you have proof. Show me. I walked to the table where Maya's phone lay. It was a cracked iPhone 8, an old model I had bought her 3 years ago. Maya, I said softly. Unlock it, baby. Show Officer Miller the video. Maya's thumb trembled as she pressed the sensor. She opened the gallery. This was taken 2 hours ago, she whispered. She pressed play. The screen showed a vertical slice of a room. It was shaky, filmed from under a bed or a desk. The audio was clear, though. Terrifyingly clear. Get out of my sight, you little witch. That was Jessica's voice. You are ruining the vibe. We are trying to celebrate. Then a thud. The sound of something hitting a wall. Mom's easel. Maya whispered to Miller. She threw the easel. Then Brad's voice. Just lock her in, Jessica. I don't want to hear her whining. We will deal with her in the morning. She needs to eat, Jessica said, but she was laughing. Actually, no. Let her starve. Maybe she will lose some of that baby fat. Fine, Brad said. Lock it. I will get the padlock. The video ended with the sound of a heavy hasp clicking shut and Maya's muffled sobbing. Miller watched it twice. His face, which had been neutral, hardened into stone. He looked at Maya's arm again where the bruises were beginning to darken into an ugly purple. He turned to me. "This is probable cause for child endangerment," he said. I exhaled. "Thank you." But Thaddeus Miller continued, and the tone of his voice broke my heart. "You know I can't leave her here." I looked at him. I knew. I had known it from the moment she climbed through my window. "The restraining order is still active," Miller said, "and even if we arrest the father tonight, we can't legally place her with you until a judge overturns the order. The system doesn't work that fast." "So what happens?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We have to take her into protective custody," Miller said. "Emergency foster care, just for a few days until the hearing." I looked at Maya. Her eyes went wide. "No," she cried, grabbing my hand. "Grandpa, no. Don't let them take me. I want to stay here." I knelt down in front of her. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than burying my wife. Harder than burying my daughter. "Listen to me, Maya," I said, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to the auditor." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "If you stay here, Brad will send lawyers. He will say I kidnapped you. He will drag you back to that house within an hour. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly. "But if you go with Officer Miller, I said you enter the system. The system is cold and it is scary, but it is a fortress. Brad can't touch you there. He can't get you out. You will be safe from him and Jessica." "But I will be alone," she whispered. "You are never alone," I said, pressing my hand against her heart. "I am fighting for you. But to win the war, I have to let you go for a few days. Can you be strong? Can you be Tiana's daughter for me?" She bit her lip and nodded. "Okay, Grandpa." Miller stepped forward gently. "Come on, sweetie. We will get you some hot chocolate at the station." I watched them walk out the door. My house felt instantly empty. A cavern of silence. I walked to the window to watch. Brad was waiting by the curb. He saw Miller leading Maya to the patrol car. He stepped forward, expecting her to be handed over to him. "She is coming with me, right?" he asked, reaching for her arm. Miller stepped between them, his chest puffed out, blocking Brad's path. "No, Mr. Sterling," Miller said loud enough for me to hear. "The child is being placed in protective custody pending an investigation into domestic abuse and neglect based on video evidence." "What?" Brad shrieked, his voice cracked. "You can't do that. I am her father. That video is fake. The old man doctored it." "Step back, sir," Miller warned, his hand drifting to his belt. "You will be contacted by a caseworker. Until then, you are to have no contact with the child." "But the money," Brad blurted out. It slipped out before he could stop it. "The money?" Miller asked, frowning. "I mean, the support," Brad stammered, realizing his mistake. "Who is going to—" "She needs her things." "Get in your car, sir," Miller said, "or I will add a disorderly conduct charge to the file." Miller put Maya in the back seat of the cruiser. She looked back at my house one last time. I raised my hand in a silent salute. The police cars drove away. Brad was left standing alone on the wet pavement. He looked small. He looked like a man who had just realized his wallet was missing. Without Maya in his house, he wasn't a single father. He was just a widower living in a house he didn't own, spending money that wasn't his. The shield was gone. He looked up at my window. Our eyes met across the rain-soaked lawn. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just stared. He got into his Mercedes and peeled away tires, screeching. I locked the door. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink. I needed a clear head. 2 hours passed. The storm outside calmed down, but the storm inside me was raging. I sat in my armchair in the living room facing the front door. I wasn't reading. I wasn't watching TV. I was cleaning my Remington 870. It was a beautiful shotgun, walnut stock blued steel barrel. I used to hunt ducks with it back in the 90s. I hadn't fired it in years, but I kept it oiled. At 3 a.m., the headlights swept across my living room wall. He was back. I heard the car door slam. Then heavy footsteps stomping up the path. He wasn't sneaking around anymore. He was drunk. I could hear it in the heavy clumsiness of his gait. "Thaddeus!" he screamed. Bam! 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 He pounded on the door with his fist. "Open up, you old bat. I know you are in there." I sat still. I slid a shell into the chamber. The sound was distinct. Click-clack. It is a universal language. Even a drunk man understands the sound of a pump-action shotgun. You ruined everything. Brad shouted, his voice slurring. The social worker called. They froze the payments. They said I can't access the stipend without physical custody. Do you know what you have done? I smiled in the darkness. So that was it. The check I sent yesterday with the special memo line. By placing Maya in foster care, the state had automatically frozen the trust disbursements. He was cut off. I have a mortgage, Brad yelled, kicking the door. I have car payments. Jessica is going to leave me if the money stops. You selfish old bastard. Open the door. I didn't answer. I just watched the door handle jiggle. Come on, Brad, I thought. Break it down, come inside, give me a reason. In most states, you can't shoot a man for banging on your door. But in this state, we have the castle doctrine. If he broke that threshold, if he threatened my life in my own home, I had the right to stop him. And God help me, part of me wanted him to try. Part of me, the part that had seen Maya's bruises, wanted to put an end to this right here and right now. But the auditor in me knew better. If I shot him, I would go to prison, and Maya would be an orphan. So I waited. Brad kicked the door one last time. Then I heard him slide down to the porch floor. He was sobbing. It wasn't the crying of a man who missed his daughter. It was the crying of a man who was terrified of being poor. It is not fair, he blubbered. It is my money. I earned it putting up with you people. You people. There it was, the truth at the bottom of the bottle. I stood up and walked to the door. I didn't open it. I leaned close to the wood. Go home, Brad, I said, my voice low and hard. Go home and look at your empty house, because that is your future. Empty. There was silence on the other side. Then the sound of him scrambling up. This isn't over. Thaddeus, he hissed. I will get her back, and when I do, I will take her so far away you will never see her again. He stumbled back to his car. I watched him drive away, swerving slightly. I sat back down in the armchair with the shotgun across my lap. I wouldn't sleep tonight. He was desperate now. And a desperate man is dangerous. But he had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was fighting a grandfather. He didn't realize he was fighting the bank. And the bank always calls its debts. I picked up my phone. I sent a text to Saul. He took the bait. The payments are frozen. Proceed to phase 2. The sun would be up in 3 hours. And when it rose, I was going to foreclose on Bradley Sterling's life. The morning after Maya was taken into protective custody, I didn't wake up tired. I woke up dangerous. Grief is a heavy blanket that smothers you, but anger is a fuel. And right now I was burning with a cold blue flame. I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of black coffee and a stack of files that smelled like old paper and justice. The sun was shining outside, but for Bradley Sterling, the storm was just beginning. I wasn't waiting for the court hearing regarding custody. That was a distraction. That was the show Brad wanted to put on for the world. He wanted to argue about parenting styles and emotional stability. He wanted to make it a he said, she said battle. But I was done arguing. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to follow the money. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked into Saul Cohen's office. Saul looked at me over his rimless glasses. He didn't ask how I was. He knew. He just pushed a document across his mahogany desk. It is filed, Thaddeus, Saul said. The motion for a full forensic accounting of the implied trust. I picked up the paper. It was beautiful. In the legal world, there are few things more destructive than a demand for an independent audit. It is not an accusation. It is a question. A very expensive, very invasive question. Because of that memo line on the check, Saul explained Brad accepted the funds as a fiduciary. Legally, he wasn't the owner of that money. He was the manager. And managers have to show receipts. We are asking for records going back 7 years, I said, scanning the document. 7 years. Saul nodded. $280,000. We are demanding proof that every single cent was used for the direct benefit of Maya Sterling, not household expenses, not mortgage payments, and certainly not for his personal lifestyle. I smiled. It was a grim smile. He doesn't have the receipts, Saul. I know, Saul said, leaning back, and that is why he is going to panic. I had a courier deliver this to his office 20 minutes ago. I checked my watch. 9:25. Right about now, I said, closing my eyes and imagining the scene. Across town in a glass-walled office on the 35th floor, Brad Sterling was probably sipping his morning latte, feeling like a winner. He had removed the nuisance. He had his daughter tucked away in the system where I couldn't reach her. He probably thought he had won the game. Then his receptionist would walk in. She would hand him a thick envelope with the red seal of the Cohen law firm. He would open it expecting a settlement offer, maybe a plea for visitation. Instead, he would see the words, "Demand for production of financial records." I could almost hear the sound of his coffee cup hitting the desk. At 10:30, my phone rang. It wasn't Brad. It was his lawyer, Harrison Thorne. Mr. King Thorne's voice was tight. He wasn't using his smooth courtroom baritone anymore. He sounded like a man who had just stepped in something unpleasant. "Mr. Thorne," I said, keeping my voice level. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "We received your motion," Thorne said. "This is harassment, Thaddeus. You know it. I know it. Brad is a grieving father trying to keep his head above water, demanding 7 years of receipts for grocery bills and school supplies is absurd. It is a fishing expedition." "It is not a fishing expedition," I said. "It is an audit. And if Brad has nothing to hide, it should be very easy. Just show us the ledger." Thorne sighed. "Look, Thaddeus, Brad is willing to be reasonable. He is willing to drop the restraining order. He is willing to let you see Maya on weekends, provided you withdraw this financial motion. We can settle this like family." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Family," I repeated. "You want to talk about family? Yesterday, your client had my granddaughter thrown into foster care to protect his bank account. Yesterday, he stood on my lawn and laughed. There is no family here, Mr. Thorne. There is only a plaintiff and a defendant. So you are refusing to settle." "I am not settling," I said. "I am collecting. Tell your client he has 48 hours to produce the documents, or we will seek a court order to freeze his personal assets for breach of fiduciary duty." I hung up. Saul looked at me and grinned. "He is scared. They are trying to trade Maya for the money." "He doesn't get to trade," I said. "He loses both." 2 days later, the boxes arrived. In civil litigation, you can't just say no to an audit. You have to comply. So Brad did what guilty men always do. He tried to bury us in paper. He sent 10 boxes of unsorted bank statements, credit card bills, and random invoices, hoping we would get tired of looking. He forgot who he was dealing with. I spent 30 years at the IRS. I don't get tired of looking. I live for the look. I set up a war room in Saul's conference room. For 12 hours a day, I went through every piece of paper. I built a spreadsheet. Column A was the money I sent. Column B was where it went. It didn't take long to find the pattern. It started small. 5 years ago, just a few months after I sent the annual $40,000 check, there was a withdrawal of $3,000. No receipt, just a cash withdrawal. Then it got bolder. 4 years ago, a payment of $8,000 to Paradise Island Resorts. I looked it up. It was an all-inclusive couples retreat in the Caribbean. Maya didn't go on that trip. I remembered because I babysat her that week. Brad had told me he was going to a real estate conference in Florida. He lied. He used my money to take a vacation with a woman, probably Jessica. Then 3 years ago, the dam broke. I found a transfer of $15,000 to Porsche Financial Services. It was a down payment. I picked up the statement and held it up to the light. There it was. My granddaughter's tuition money used to buy the German engineering sitting in his driveway, the same car he drove when he came to mock me. But the biggest shock came from the credit card statements. Brad had a gambling problem. It wasn't obvious at first. It was hidden in small charges. DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM Online, $50 here, $100 there. But then I saw the big ones. 2 years ago, a charge of $12,000 to the Bellagio Las Vegas. I cross-referenced the date. That was the same week Maya needed braces. Brad had told me he couldn't afford the ceramic ones she wanted, so she had to get the cheap metal ones that cut her gums. He said insurance wouldn't cover it. He lied. He took the money meant for her smile and bet it on black. I felt a cold rage settling in my stomach. It wasn't just theft, it was cruelty. He had denied his daughter basic comforts, not because he was poor, but because he was selfish. He had let her walk in broken shoes so he could play high roller in Vegas. And then there were the jewelry store receipts. Tiffany & Company, $5,000. A necklace, Cartier, $8,000. A bracelet. I looked at the dates. Christmas, Valentine's Day. Maya never got gifts like that. For her birthday, Brad usually gave her a gift card or a sweater from a discount rack. These gifts were for Jessica. He was draping his mistress in diamonds bought with the money I saved from my government pension. He was adorning the woman who abused my granddaughter with the fruits of my labor. I compiled everything. The Porsche, the gambling, the jewelry, the vacations. The total misappropriation was over $200,000. He hadn't spent a dime on Maya's education that he didn't have to. He had used my daughter's death benefit as his personal piggy bank. I sat back in the chair and rubbed my eyes. Saul walked in carrying 2 coffees. "How does it look, Thaddeus?" "It looks like grand larceny," I said, handing him the summary sheet. "He spent it all, Saul. All of it." Saul whistled low and long. "This is criminal, Thaddeus. This isn't just civil anymore. This is embezzlement." "I know," I said, "but we are not going to the police just yet." "Why not?" "Because the police are slow," I said. "And Brad has good lawyers who can argue intent. They will say it was a commingled household account. They will say money is fungible. They will drag it out for years. So what do? "We call the one organization that doesn't care about intent," I said. "The one organization that doesn't accept excuses. The one organization that scares people more than the FBI." Saul smiled. "The IRS." I nodded. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the general tip line. I called a direct number. A number belonging to a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She was my trainee 15 years ago. Now she was a division chief in the Criminal Investigation Unit. "Sarah," I said when she answered. "It is Thaddeus. Thaddeus King. To what do I owe the honor?" "You enjoying retirement?" "Not exactly, Sarah. I am working on a personal case, and I found something interesting." "Oh, I have a stack of bank statements here, Sarah. A certain individual has been receiving $40,000 a year in non-taxable trust distributions. But here's the thing. He didn't use them for the trust. He used them as personal income. And looking at his tax returns, which are public record for his business filings, he never declared it." Sarah's voice sharpened. "That is tax evasion, Thaddeus. Unreported income. How much are we talking? Over 7 years counting penalties and interest, probably close to $500,000. "Who is it, Thaddeus?" "Bradley Sterling, real estate agent." I heard the sound of typing on her end. "I see him," Sarah said. "He flagged our system last year for excessive deductions, but we didn't have the manpower to audit." "Well," I said, "I just did the audit for you. I have the receipts. The gambling losses he claimed as business expenses, the vacations he claimed as site visits, and the income he hid." "Send it over," Sarah said. "Send it all." I hung up the phone. Saul was looking at me with a mixture of admiration and fear. "You just nuked him, Thaddeus." "No," I said, standing up and gathering the files. "I just adjusted his tax bracket." I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Brad was probably trying to sell the house right now, trying to turn his last asset into cash before the walls closed in. But he didn't know that the walls were already closing, and they weren't made of wood or brick. They were made of federal tax code. Al Capone didn't go to jail for murder. He went to jail because he didn't pay his taxes. Brad Sterling was about to learn that history repeats itself. I put on my coat. "Now, Saul," I said, "let's go get my granddaughter back. We have enough evidence here to prove he is not just a bad father. He is a criminal." We walked out of the office. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple. It fitting, because tomorrow Bradley Sterling was going to wake up in a world of hurt. The glass tower where Brad rented his office was a monument to vanity. It was all chrome and mirrors designed to make you feel important just by walking through the lobby. I walked in on a Tuesday morning wearing my old raincoat and carrying a cane I didn't really need. The receptionist didn't even look up. To her, I was just another old man, probably lost looking for the restroom. She didn't know I was the man who had just bought the building's lease. Well, not the building, but the debt. 3 days ago, Saul Cohen and I set up a shell company. We called it TK Holdings. It sounds corporate. It sounds faceless. Through this company, I approached the regional bank that held the loans for Brad's business. I knew from the audit that Brad was 3 months behind on his commercial line of credit. Banks hate bad debt. They are terrified of it. When I offered to buy the note for 80 cents on the dollar, they practically threw the paperwork at me. So as of 9 a.m. this morning, I wasn't just Brad's father-in-law. I was his creditor. I owned his debt. I owned his leverage, and I was about to squeeze him until he couldn't breathe. I took the elevator to the 35th floor. The doors opened to the lobby of Sterling Real Estate. Usually there was soft jazz playing and fresh flowers on the desk. Today there was shouting. "I need more time, damn it," It was Brad's voice coming from behind the frosted glass of his office door. "I can't liquidate that fast," he screamed. "The market is cold. You can't just call a loan like this. It is predatory." I smiled. He was talking to the representative from TK Holdings. He was talking to Saul, pretending to be a ruthless asset manager. I walked over to the reception desk. The young woman looked frazzled. Her phone was ringing and she wasn't answering it. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked nervously. "I am here to see Bradley Sterling," I said softly. "I am family." She looked relieved. "Oh, thank God. Please go in. Maybe you can calm him down. He is having a terrible day." I walked to the door and opened it without knocking. Brad was standing behind his desk, his tie loosened, his hair a mess. He was gripping the phone so hard his knuckles were white. He looked up and saw me. "I have to go," he said into the phone and slammed it down. He stared at me. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. "What do you want, Thaddeus?" he barked. "I don't have time for your games today. The wolves are at the door." I walked into the room and closed the door behind me. I took a seat in one of the leather chairs opposite his desk. I took my time settling in, adjusting my coat, resting my cane against the wood. "I heard about the audit, Brad," I said, lying effortlessly. "Saul told me. He said the lawyers are pushing hard." Brad laughed a manic sound. "The audit. The audit is the least of my problems, old man. My lenders are calling the notes. Some investment group bought my debt and they want full repayment immediately. They are threatening to seize the accounts. They are threatening to lock the doors." I nodded, looking concerned. "That sounds serious." "Serious," Brad yelled, throwing his hands up. "It is a disaster. If they freeze my operating accounts, I can't pay the mortgage on the house. I can't pay the lease on the car. I can't pay Jessica's—" He stopped himself. "Jessica's," what I asked, innocently. "Nothing," he muttered, sinking into his chair. He put his head in his hands. "I am going to lose it all, Thaddeus. Everything. The house, the business, the reputation." I sat there and watched him crumble. It was fascinating. This was the man who called me senile. This was the man who locked my granddaughter in a room. Now he was just a child afraid of the dark. I leaned forward. "Maybe I can help," I said. Brad looked up. His eyes narrowed. You are the one suing me. You are the one who started this. I am the one who wants my granddaughter to be safe," I said. "And I am the one who hates to see Tiana's husband living on the street. It would be an embarrassment to the family name." Brad wiped his face with his hand. "What are you talking about?" "I have assets, Brad. You know that. My house, my pension fund, the cabin up north." Brad sat up straighter. The greed flickered in his eyes, overriding the fear. It was instinctive for him. How much, he asked. How much can you access? I did some calculations, I said. If I sell my house, and maybe liquidate the retirement accounts, I could probably pull together $400,000. Cash. Brad's mouth opened slightly. $400,000 would solve his immediate problem with TK Holdings. It would keep the wolves at bay for another few months. It would save his Porsche. "You would do that?" he asked, his voice trembling with hope. "After everything, after the restraining order." I sighed and looked at the floor. "I am an old man, Brad. I am tired of fighting. I miss Maya. And if you go bankrupt, what happens to her? She ends up in the system permanently. I can't let that happen." Brad stood up. He walked around the desk. He was practically vibrating. "You are right, Thaddeus. You are absolutely right. We need to put family first. If you help me with this loan, I can fix everything. I can drop the restraining order. We can bring Maya home." I looked at him. I saw the lie behind his eyes. He had no intention of bringing Maya home. He was going to take the money, pay off the debt, and then run to Europe with Jessica just like he planned. But I needed him to think I bought it. "There is just one condition," I said. Brad stopped. "What?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a legal document filed by a lawyer. It was handwritten on plain yellow paper. "I need to know I am not throwing my money into a black hole," I said. "I need to know the truth about the trust fund." Brad stiffened. "The truth. You used the money, Brad." I said, my voice gentle, not accusatory. "The money I sent for Maya. You used it for other things." Brad looked at the paper, then at me. "If I admit that," he whispered, "you will take it to the DA." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This stays between us. This is for my peace of mind. I need to know that if I bail you out now, you won't make the same mistake again. I need you to acknowledge the debt so we can start fresh. It is just a family agreement, Brad. A promise. I uncapped my fountain pen and laid it on top of the paper. Sign this, admitting you borrowed the trust funds for personal use and promise to repay it when the market turns. Do that and I will call my broker today to list my house. Brad looked at the pen. He looked at the paper. I, Bradley Sterling, acknowledged that I utilized funds from the King Trust totaling $280,000 for personal business expenses and lifestyle maintenance. It was a confession, a full, unadulterated confession of embezzlement. But to Brad, it looked like a lifeline. He thought he was smarter than me. He thought once he had the $400,000 from my house sale, he could hire a better lawyer to nullify this piece of paper. He thought I was a desperate old man trying to buy his way back into his granddaughter's life. He didn't know I wasn't buying access. I was buying a conviction. He picked up the pen. I promise, Thaddeus, he said, putting on his best sincere face. I will pay it all back. I just need a bridge loan. He pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed. He signed his name with that same arrogant flourish. There, he said, handing it back to me. Done. Now when can we get the money? I took the paper. I blew on the ink to dry it. I folded it carefully and put it back in my breast pocket right next to my heart. I will call the broker this afternoon, I said, standing up. Brad grabbed my hand. He shook it vigorously. Thank you, Thaddeus. You are saving my life. You really are. I looked at him. I felt a strange sense of pity. He had no idea that he had just signed his own prison sentence. You should go home, Brad, I said. Get some rest. You look terrible. I will, he said, beaming. I will go tell Jessica the good news. I walked out of the office. The receptionist smiled at me. Did it go okay, she asked. Yes, I said, adjusting my hat. We came to an understanding. I took the elevator down. When I got to the lobby, I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of the confession and sent it to Saul. Got it, he signed. Saul replied instantly, You are a magician, Thaddeus, but a scary one. I walked out into the street. The city noise washed over me. Now came the final act. Brad thought he was getting a check. He thought he was getting saved. He was about to throw a party to celebrate his survival, a party where he would flaunt his lifestyle one last time. Perfect. I walked to my car. I needed to go to the bank not to withdraw money, but to meet with the foreclosure team, because TK Holdings wasn't going to wait for my house to sell. TK Holdings was going to call the loan tomorrow, and when the hammer fell, I wanted to make sure it fell when everyone was watching. Brad wanted a show. I was going to give him a finale he would never forget. Saturday night arrived with the kind of perfect weather that rich people pay for. The sky was clear, the air was crisp, and the moon hung low over the house on Elm Street. But it wasn't the house I remembered. It wasn't the sanctuary where Tiana used to plant hydrangeas and where Maya learned to ride her bike. Tonight it looked like a nightclub. Brad had spared no expense. There were floodlights bathing the colonial columns in a wash of violet and gold. There was a red carpet rolling down the driveway covering the cracks in the pavement that he had promised to fix 3 years ago. A valet stand was set up near the mailbox, manned by teenagers in red vests parking cars that cost more than my entire pension. I sat in my car 3 houses down watching the parade. Porsches, Teslas, Range Rovers. The elite of the city were arriving to celebrate the union of Bradley Sterling and Jessica Vance. They were coming to toast a man who they thought was a successful real estate mogul. They didn't know they were walking into a crime scene. Brad thought this party was his victory lap. He thought the document he signed in his office, the confession disguised as a loan agreement, had saved him. He thought I was at home packing up my life to sell my house to bail him out. He thought he had outsmarted the old man one last time. He was wrong. I checked my watch. 8 o'clock. The party was in full swing. I could hear the bass of the music thumping through the closed windows of my Ford. It was a vulgar sound disrespecting the quiet dignity of the neighborhood. I turned to the passenger seat. Saul Cohen was sitting there checking his phone. Beside him was Detective Sarah Jenkins from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and a caseworker from Child Protective Services named Mrs. Gable. It is time, I said. Saul nodded. Remember Thaddeus? Let him dig the hole. You just push him in. I don't need to push, I said, opening the car door. I just need to turn on the lights. We walked up the street. We didn't look like guests. I was wearing my gray suit, the one that smelled of mothballs and justice. Sarah and Mrs. Gable were in windbreakers with their badges clipped to their belts. Saul was carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to bludgeon a man. The valet boy tried to stop us at the driveway. "Sir, do you have an invitation?" he asked, eyeing my cane. "I don't need an invitation, son," I said, walking past him. "I own the pavement you are standing on." We walked up the red carpet. The front door was wide open. Inside the house was unrecognizable. The walls had been repainted a stark, soulless white. Tiana's warm yellow kitchen was gone, replaced by cold marble and stainless steel. It smelled of expensive perfume and catered shrimp. The living room was packed. There were at least 100 people holding flutes of champagne, laughing, talking over the music. In the center of the room, standing on a small platform near the fireplace, was Brad. He looked like a prince. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket holding court. Jessica was next to him, clinging to his arm. She was wearing a dress that glittered like diamonds, and on her neck was the Tiffany necklace, the $5,000 necklace bought with Maya's tuition money. I stopped in the archway. Saul and the officers stood behind me in the shadows. Brad raised his glass. The music lowered. To new beginnings, he shouted, his voice booming with confidence. To love, to family, and to the future. We are expanding, everyone. Sterling Real Estate is going global. And soon Jessica and I will be taking a well-deserved sabbatical in Europe. The crowd cheered. Glasses clinked. Jessica kissed him on the cheek, flashing a ring that probably cost another 10,000 of my dollars. That is when I stepped into the light. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just tapped my cane on the hardwood floor. Tap, tap, tap. It was a sharp, dissonant sound that cut through the applause. Heads turned. The cheering died down. People parted ways, creating a path between me and the happy couple. They whispered, "Who is that? Is that the gardener? Is that a beggar?" Brad saw me. His smile froze. For a second he looked terrified. Then he remembered the lie. He remembered that I was supposed to be his savior. "Thaddeus," he called out, forcing a jovial tone. "Everyone look who it is. My father-in-law, Thaddeus King. Come in, Thaddeus. Come have a drink." We were just toasting to family. He stepped down from the platform, walking toward me with his arms open. He wanted to hug me to show everyone that the crazy old man was under control. I didn't move. I kept both hands on my cane. "I am not here for a drink, Brad," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden silence of the room it carried to every corner. Brad stopped a few feet away. His smile faltered. "Thaddeus, don't be like this," he hissed through his teeth, so only I could hear. "Not tonight. We have a deal. Did you list the house?" "There is no deal, Brad," I said loudly. "And there is no house to list, because I am not here as your father-in-law, and I am certainly not here as your savior." The guests were murmuring now. Jessica looked nervous. She tugged at Brad's sleeve. "Brad, make him leave. He is ruining it." Brad turned to the crowd, giving an apologetic shrug. "I am so sorry, everyone. My father-in-law has been struggling lately. His mind isn't what it used to be. He gets confused." He turned back to me, his eyes hard. "Get out, Thaddeus. Now, or I will have security throw you out." "You can't throw me out, Brad," I said. "You can't throw a man out of his own house." Brad laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "This isn't your house, Thaddeus. It is mine. My name is on the deed." "Read the deed again," I said. "Or better yet, read the eviction notice." I stepped aside. Saul Cohen stepped forward. He didn't look like a party guest. He looked like an executioner. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document with a red stamp. Bradley Sterling Saul announced, his voice gravelly and authoritative. "You are hereby served with an immediate notice of eviction and lease termination regarding the property at 42 Elm Street." Brad stared at Saul. "Eviction? What are you talking about? I own this place." "Incorrect," Saul said. "You hold a life estate interest contingent on two things. One, that you remain the primary guardian of Maya Sterling. Two, that you do not cohabitate with a romantic partner while the child is a minor." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. "By placing your daughter in foster care 3 days ago," Saul continued, "you violated Condition 1. And by moving Ms. Jessica Vance into this residence, as admitted by your own social media posts, you violated Condition 2. Saul handed the paper to Brad. Brad didn't take it. It fluttered to the floor, landing on his shiny patent leather shoes. "Your interest in this property has reverted to the trust," Saul said. "The trustee is Mr. Thaddeus King, and Mr. King wants you out. Now." Brad's face turned a shade of gray that matched the expensive curtains. He looked around the room. His friends, his investors, his rich neighbors were all staring at him. The illusion was cracking. This is a misunderstanding, Brad stammered. Thaddeus, please. Let's go to my office. We can talk about this. The loan you promised. I didn't promise you a loan, Brad, I said, stepping closer. I promised I would fix the mistake I made 7 years ago. The mistake of letting you think you were a man. I pointed my cane at Jessica. She shrank back, clutching her necklace. And speaking of mistakes, I said, that is a beautiful necklace, Ms. Vance. Tiffany, right? She nodded dumbly. It looks lovely on you, I said. It is a shame it was bought with money meant for my granddaughter's dental work. A gasp went through the crowd. That is a lie, Brad screamed. He lunged toward me. That is slander. I will sue you for every penny you have. He was stopped by a hand on his chest. A firm, uncompromising hand. Detective Sarah Jenkins stepped out from the shadows. She wasn't wearing a party dress. She was wearing her badge. Bradley Sterling, she said. I am Special Agent Jenkins with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Brad froze. IRS. We are not here for the eviction, Mr. Sterling, Sarah said. We are here about the tax returns for Sterling Real Estate and the $280,000 of unreported income you embezzled from the King Family Trust. Brad looked at Sarah, then at me. His eyes were wide with horror. He realized then that the piece of paper he signed in his office wasn't a loan agreement. It was a confession. Brad stuttered. And Mrs. Gable from Child Protective Services stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, she said, we are also opening an investigation into the welfare of your son Leo. Given the current situation and the loss of your housing, we need to assess his safety immediately. The room erupted. Guests were putting down their glasses and backing away. No one wanted to be near the blast zone. The investors who were shaking Brad's hand 5 minutes ago were now checking their phones, pretending to have urgent calls. Brad looked around wildly. He was drowning. The house was gone. The money was gone. The reputation was gone. He turned to Jessica. Baby, tell them. Tell them we have the money. Tell them about the Europe trip. Jessica looked at the agents. She looked at the eviction notice on the floor. Then she looked at Brad with cold, calculating eyes. I don't know what he is talking about, she said, pulling her arm away from his. I didn't know anything about this. He told me he owned the house. He told me he was rich. Jessica Brad pleaded, reaching for her. Don't touch me, she hissed. She took off the ring and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and rolled under the sofa. I am not going to jail for you, Brad. I have my own kid to think about. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, leaving him alone in the center of the room. I walked up to him. He was trembling. He looked small in his white tuxedo, a clown whose circus had just burned down. The party is over, Brad, I said. Brad looked at me. There were tears in his eyes, but I felt nothing. You planned this, he whispered. You set me up. I didn't set you up, I said. I just audited you, and you came up short. I turned to the guests. I apologize for the interruption, everyone, I announced. But this is private property, and the owner would like to close up for the night. Please vacate the premises. The valet has your keys. It was a stampede. The elite of the city couldn't get out fast enough. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty. The music was off. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and Brad's ragged breathing. Officer Sarah Jenkins took out a pair of handcuffs. Mr. Sterling, she said, you have the right to remain silent. I watched as she cuffed him. The metal clicked shut. It was a satisfying sound, more satisfying than any music. They led him out past the decorations, past the uneaten shrimp, past the life he had stolen and pretended was his own. I stood alone in the living room. I looked at the white walls. I looked at the spot where Tiana's easel used to be. It was a mess, but it was my mess now, and I was going to clean it up. I walked over and picked up a glass of champagne that someone had left on the mantel. I raised it to the empty room. To family, I whispered, the real kind. Then I poured the champagne into the fireplace and walked out into the night. The silence in the living room was absolute. A moment ago, the air had been filled with jazz music and the clinking of crystal glasses, but now the only sound was the hum of the expensive refrigerator in the open concept kitchen. 100 of the city's wealthiest socialites were frozen in place staring at me. They were sharks, and they knew the smell of blood in the water. They knew that the man in the white tuxedo standing on the platform was bleeding out even if he didn't know it yet. Brad looked at the eviction notice lying on the floor near his patent leather shoes. He looked at it as if it were a venomous snake. He tried to laugh. It was a pathetic sound, a dry chuckle that died in his throat. "This is a joke," he stammered, looking around at his guests. "Thaddeus, you have a twisted sense of humor. Everyone, this is just a little family drama." "My father-in-law is confused." "He is not confused," Saul Cohen said. His voice was like grinding stones. "He is the trustee, and you, Mr. Sterling, are a trespasser." Brad's face turned a violent shade of red. He stepped down from the platform and marched toward me. He stopped 3 feet away, remembering the cane in my hand and the police officer standing behind me. "You can't evict me," he hissed. "I have lived here for 10 years. I am the owner of record. I pay the property taxes." "You pay the taxes with my money," I said calmly. "And being the owner of record means nothing when there is a life estate deed attached to the property." I turned to the crowd. I wanted them to hear this. I wanted to make sure that when Brad Sterling fell, he fell all the way to the bottom. When my daughter Tiana died, I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room, we didn't transfer the title to her husband. We knew grief makes people do foolish things. So we transferred the title to a trust. The Tiana King Sterling Trust. The sole beneficiary is my granddaughter Maya. I pointed the tip of my cane at Brad. Mr. Sterling was granted the right to live here. I continued under very specific conditions. It is called a life estate. It means he is a glorified tenant. He can stay here as long as he is the primary caregiver of the child and as long as the home remains a wholesome environment for her upbringing. I looked at Saul. Read Clause 14. Saul. Saul lifted the document and adjusted his glasses. Clause 14, subsection B, he read. The morality and cohabitation clause. Should the life tenant cohabitate with a romantic partner who is not a spouse, or should the life tenant remarry, the life estate is automatically terminated. The property reverts immediately to the trust for the exclusive use of the beneficiary. Saul lowered the paper. You announced your engagement tonight, Mr. Sterling, Saul said, and you moved Miss Vance into the master bedroom 3 days ago. By your own public admission, you have triggered the termination clause. Your lease ended the moment you put her clothes in my client's daughter's closet. Brad looked at Jessica. She was standing frozen near the fireplace, her hand clutching the diamond necklace that wasn't hers. This is illegal, Brad shouted. You can't just kick people out. I have tenant rights. I need 30 days' notice. I need a court hearing. You had a hearing, Saul said. When you signed the deed 10 years ago, you waived your rights to standard eviction proceedings in the event of a clause violation. You agreed to immediate surrender of the premises. Saul looked at his watch. It is 8:15 p.m. You have until 8:30 to vacate the property. After that, you will be removed for trespassing. Brad looked around the room wildly. He was looking for an ally. He was looking for one of his rich friends to step forward and say this was an outrage. But the room was full of people who understood contracts. They understood leverage, and they saw that Brad had none. They started to move. At first, it was just a few people near the back putting down their drinks and slipping out the French doors. Then it became a stream. No one said goodbye. No one shook his hand. They just turned their backs on him, distancing themselves from the failure. Jessica watched the room empty out. She watched the status she craved walking out the door. She looked at Brad. He was sweating, his perfect hair falling over his forehead. Do something, she whispered. Her voice was harsh. Fix this, Brad. You said you owned everything. You said the old man was powerless. I do own it, Brad screamed at her. He is lying. He is trying to scare us. He grabbed his phone. I am calling my lawyer. Harrison will stop this. Call him, I said. Put him on speaker. Brad dialed with trembling fingers. He waited. He paced in a small circle. Harrison, he shouted when the line connected. They are here. Thaddeus and his lawyer. They have some paper claiming a life estate violation. They are trying to kick me out of my own engagement party. Tell them they are crazy. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Harrison, Brad said. I looked at the deed, Brad. Harrison's voice sounded tired and distant. I pulled it from the county archives 10 minutes ago after Mr. Cohen faxed me a courtesy copy, and Brad asked, his voice breaking, It is ironclad, Brad. You signed it. Tiana signed it. It is a standard protective trust deed. If you move the mistress in, you voided the contract. But there has to be a loophole, Brad pleaded. I have rights. You have the right to leave peacefully, Harrison said, or you have the right to be arrested. I suggest you leave, Brad. I can't help you with this. And Brad, regarding my retainer. Brad hung up the phone. He stood there staring at the screen. The device slipped from his fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. It was over. The lie was dead. I checked my watch. You have 12 minutes left, Brad, I said. I suggest you go upstairs and pack a bag. Just clothes. Nothing else. Brad looked at me with pure hatred. His eyes were wet with tears of rage. My watch, he said, reaching for his wrist. My collection. It is in the safe. The safe belongs to the house, I said, and everything in it is collateral against the $280,000 you stole. You don't take the watches, Brad. You don't take the art. You don't take the furniture. You take the clothes on your back, and you get out. He turned to Jessica. Babe, he said, reaching for her hand. Grab your things. We will go to a hotel. We will figure this out. Jessica took a step back. She looked at the white tuxedo. She looked at the empty room. She looked at the eviction notice on the floor. A hotel, she repeated. Her voice was ice cold. You told me we were going to Europe. You told me you had millions. I do, Brad insisted. I just need to access it. It is tied up. It is not tied up, I said, stepping forward. It is gone. The accounts are frozen. The house is gone. The car in the driveway is a company lease and I just canceled it. He is bankrupt, Ms. Vance. He has nothing but debt and a potential prison sentence. Jessica looked at me, then back at Brad. The calculation in her eyes was visible. She was a survivor. A parasite, yes, but a survivor. She reached behind her neck. She unclasped the Tiffany necklace. The diamonds caught the light one last time as they fell from her skin. She dropped it into Brad's hand. You are a loser, Brad, she said. She turned and walked toward the door. Jessica, wait! Brad screamed. She didn't look back. She walked out the front door, past the police officers, past the valet stand, and into the night. Brad stood alone in the center of the room. The silence was deafening. He looked at me. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. All that was left was a frightened, greedy boy. Why are you doing this? He whispered. We were family. We were never family, I said. Tiana was my family. Maya is my family. You were just a mistake we tried to correct. I motioned to the officers. It is 8:30, I said. Officer Miller stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, it is time to go. I need my things, Brad cried. I need my laptop. I need my passport. Your passport has been flagged by the IRS, I said. You aren't going anywhere, Brad, and your laptop is evidence. Miller took Brad by the arm. He didn't fight. All the fight had left him when Jessica walked out the door. He let himself be led toward the entrance. I followed them. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see him cross the threshold. We walked out onto the porch. The night air was cool. The red carpet was still there, mocking him. Brad stopped at the top of the stairs. He looked back at the house. He looked at the columns he loved so much. He looked at the garden. You can't do this, he said weakly. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, I said. And for the first time in 7 years, I don't care. Miller guided him down the steps. Wait, Brad said, stopping at the bottom. My car. At least let me take my car. I pointed to the driveway. A tow truck had just backed up to the Porsche. The driver was hooking up the chains. That is company property, I said. And TK Holdings is liquidating assets. Brad watched as his beloved car was lifted into the air. He watched as his life was dismantled piece by piece. He turned to walk away. He started down the long driveway alone. No wife, no mistress, no car, no house. He got about 10 yards before the floodlights turned off. I had flipped the switch inside the hall. The house went dark, plunging him into shadows. It was symbolic. The show was over. The lights were out. I stood on the porch of my daughter's house. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and hydrangeas. It smelled clean. Saul walked up beside me. That was brutal, Thaddeus, he said quietly. It was necessary, I said. I looked at the empty driveway. Is the locksmith coming? I asked. He is on his way, Saul said. We will change every lock tonight. Good. I turned back to the house. I walked inside and closed the heavy oak door. I engaged the deadbolt. The sound was a solid, heavy thud. I walked into the living room. It was still littered with abandoned champagne glasses. I picked up the eviction notice from the floor where Brad had dropped it. I folded it neatly and put it in my pocket. I walked to the fireplace. Tiana's portrait used to hang there before Brad took it down. I touched the empty space on the wall. "I am getting it back, baby girl," I whispered. "I am getting it all back." The house was quiet, but it wasn't a lonely quiet anymore. It was a peaceful quiet. The parasite had been removed. The healing could begin. But I wasn't done yet. Brad was on the street, but he wasn't in a cell. And until he was behind bars, Maya wasn't truly safe. I picked up my phone and called Sarah Jenkins at the IRS. "He is out of the house," I said. "He is desperate. He is flight risk." "I know," Sarah said. "We have a team on him. He just got into a cab. Where is he going?" "The airport Thaddeus. He is going to try to run." I smiled. Of course he was. He was going to try to use the offshore account he thought I didn't know about. The one in the Caymans. "Let him get through security," I said. "Let him think he made it. Then take him down at the gate." "Will do," Sarah said. I hung up. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I sat down at the island. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like the master of this house. The payoff wasn't just the eviction. It was the knowledge that Brad Sterling was running into a trap that had been set years ago, a trap made of numbers and laws. I took a sip of water. It tasted like victory. The flashing lights of the police cars were blinding, but for Brad, the real darkness was on the screen of his iPhone. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, his hands trembling so violently he could barely hold the device. He wasn't looking at the officers who were waiting to cuff him. He was looking at his banking app. He was trying to make one last transfer. He was trying to move the $50,000 he had stashed in a side account, a rainy day fund he had hidden even from me. He thought if he could just get that money to an offshore wallet, he could hire a defense attorney. He could fight this. He could survive. I watched him from the top of the stairs. I knew exactly what he was doing, and I knew exactly what he was seeing. "Damn it," Brad hissed, tapping the screen furiously. "Come on, load." He looked up at me, his eyes wild with panic. "The Wi-Fi," he shouted. "You cut the Wi-Fi, didn't you, Thaddeus?" "I didn't cut anything, Brad," I said, leaning on my cane. "Your phone has signal." "The problem isn't the connection. The problem is the account." Brad looked back down, face pale in the blue strobe lights. "Access denied. Account frozen by court order." He swiped to his second bank. The business account. Access denied. He swiped to his credit cards. Card suspended. He let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "This is impossible. You can't freeze everything. I have rights. I have operating capital." Saul Cohen stepped down the stairs. His leather shoes crunched on the gravel of the driveway. He didn't look like a lawyer anymore. He looked like the grim reaper of finance. "Mr. Sterling," Saul said, his voice cutting through the night air. "You seem to be under the impression that this is just a family dispute. It is not. This is a liquidation event." "Liquidation," Brad spat. "You don't have the authority. Only my lenders can call the notes. And I am only 3 months behind. I have a grace period." "You did have a grace period," Saul corrected. "Until this morning." Saul pulled a document from his briefcase. It wasn't the eviction notice. It was something far more lethal. At 9 a.m. today, Saul said, "TK Holdings LLC purchased your commercial debt from the regional bank. We bought the mortgage on this house. We bought the lease on your office. And we bought the promissory note on your luxury vehicle." Brad blinked. "TK Holdings. I never heard of them. Who are they? Why would they buy my bad debt?" I laughed. It was a low, rumbling laugh that came from deep in my chest. "Think about the initials, Brad," I said. "TK." Brad looked at me. Then he looked at Saul. Then back at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Thaddeus King Holdings," I said. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, almost tripping over the red carpet he had rolled out for his vanity party. "You," he whispered. "You are my creditor." "I own you, Brad," I said. "I own every cent you owe. And as the majority creditor, I have invoked the acceleration clause. I am calling the full balance due immediately, $700,000 in business loans, $400,000 on the mortgage, and $80,000 on the Porsche." I pointed to the tow truck that was backing up the driveway. The driver, a burly man named Mike, who I had hired specifically for this moment, hopped out with a chain in his hand. "You can't pay," I said. "So we are repossessing the collateral." Brad spun around. He ran toward the Porsche. It was his baby, his symbol of success. He had spent more time polishing that car than he had spent talking to his daughter in the last year. "No," he screamed, throwing himself in front of the hood. "You can't take it. It is a limited edition. Do you know what the resale value is?" Mike, the driver, didn't even blink. He just looked at the police officer standing nearby. "Officer, move this man, or do I have to drive over him?" Mike asked. Officer Miller stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, step away from the vehicle. This is a lawful repossession." Brad clung to the hood ornament, his fingernails scratching the paint. "Jessica, tell them. Tell them we have the cash. Tell them about the safe deposit box." I looked at Jessica Vance. She was standing near the valet stand, shivering in her glittering dress. She had been watching the scene unfold with a look of growing horror. Jessica stepped forward. Her face was hard. The mask of the loving fiancé had completely slipped off. "What safe deposit box, Brad?" she asked sharply. "The one at City," Brad panted. "The one with the emeralds. We can sell them. We can pay him off." I shook my head. "There are no emeralds, Ms. Vance," I said. "He pawned them 6 months ago to pay his gambling debts at the MGM Grand. The box is empty, just like his promises." Jessica froze. She looked at Brad. "Is that true?" Brad couldn't look her in the eye. He buried his face in the metal hood of the car. "Babe, listen," he sobbed. "I have a system. I was going to win it back. I just needed a little more time." Jessica let out a scream of pure rage. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had wasted 2 years on a mirage. She rushed at him not to comfort him, but to hurt him. "You liar!" she shrieked, pounding her fists on his back. "You told me you were worth millions. You told me we were going to Italy. I quit my job for you. I moved out of my apartment for you." "Jessica, please," Brad begged, shielding his head. "Not in front of them. You have nothing," she screamed. "You are nothing. You are just a broke loser living off your dead wife's father." She stepped back, breathing hard. Her hair was messy, her mascara was running. She looked around at the empty driveway, at the police, at the tow truck hooking up the car. She looked at her hand. The engagement ring was still on her finger. A 3-carat diamond solitaire. I cleared my throat. "I wouldn't count on that ring, Ms. Vance," I said. "He bought it on credit. And since he hasn't made a payment in 4 months, it technically belongs to the jeweler. But I am sure the police will let you keep it as evidence." Jessica looked at the ring as if it were burning her skin. She ripped it off her finger. She didn't hand it to Brad. She threw it. It hit him square in the forehead, leaving a small red mark before bouncing onto the gravel. "I hate you," she spat. "I hope you rot in jail." She turned and started walking down the driveway. Her high heels clicked on the pavement, a staccato rhythm of departure. "Where are you going?" Brad cried, raising his head. "Jessica, don't leave me. I can fix this." She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She walked past the police cars, past the gawking neighbors, and disappeared into the darkness. She took nothing but her anger and her survival instinct. She was a rat fleeing a sinking ship, and she wasn't about to go down with the captain. Brad watched her go. He slumped against the bumper of the Porsche. He was alone, truly alone. The tow truck driver finished hooking the chains. "All right, buddy, move it," Mike grunted. Brad slid off the car. He stood on the gravel, watching as the winch activated. The Porsche was lifted into the air, its sleek lines looking pathetic, dangling from a hook. I walked down the stairs, slowly leaning on my cane. I stopped a few feet from him. He looked at me. His eyes were hollow. "You took everything," he whispered. "No, Brad," I said. "I just took back what wasn't yours." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was the receipt from the parking garage where I had tracked him that first night. "You know," I said softly, "if you had just loved her. If you had just bought her a pair of shoes instead of buying yourself a watch. If you had just been a father, we wouldn't be here. You could have lived in this house forever." Brad looked down at his shoes. They were scuffed and dirty. "I tried," he choked out. "No," I said. "You didn't try. You took. And now the balance is 0. Officer Miller stepped forward again. He had a pair of handcuffs in his hand. "Bradley Sterling," he said, "you are under arrest for tax evasion, embezzlement, and fraud. Put your hands behind your back." Brad turned around slowly. He didn't fight. He offered his wrists like a man surrendering to gravity. The metal clicked shut. I watched as they led him to the squad car. He had to duck his head to get in. The door slammed shut, sealing him in a cage of glass and steel. The tow truck roared to life, dragging the Porsche down the street. The police cars followed their lights flashing in the night. I stood in the driveway alone. The silence returned. I looked down at the ground. The engagement ring was glittering in the moonlight near my foot. I bent down painfully and picked it up. It was heavy, cold. I put it in my pocket. I would sell it, and the money would go to the Tiana King Scholarship Fund. I turned and walked back up the stairs. My legs were tired, but my heart was light. The debt was paid, the house was clean. I walked inside and locked the door. Tomorrow would be a busy day. I had to file paperwork. I had to meet with social services. I had to bring Maya home. But tonight I was going to sleep. For the first time in 7 years, I was going to sleep without worry, because the auditor had closed the book, and the numbers finally added up. The county detention center does not smell like justice. It smells of industrial bleach floor wax and the sour metallic scent of fear. I sat on a bolted-down steel stool in visitor booth number 4 waiting. I was wearing my Sunday suit, the one I usually save for church. I wanted to look my best. I wanted him to see the difference between a free man with a clean conscience and a prisoner with nothing left but his lies. I checked my watch. It was 10 a.m. Outside, the sun was shining on a world that was moving on without Bradley Sterling. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing hum. The heavy steel door on the other side of the glass partition buzzed. Then it clanked open. A guard stepped in first, looking bored. Then came Brad. I almost didn't recognize him. It had only been 3 days since the party, but the transformation was total. The man who had stood in a white tuxedo holding a glass of champagne was gone. In his place was a hunched figure in a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair, which was usually gelled to perfection, was greasy and matted. His face was covered in stubble, but it was his eyes that told the real story. They were red-rimmed, darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for a hole in the fence. He saw me. For a second, a spark of hope flared in those bloodshot eyes. It was pathetic. He sat down heavily on the other side of the glass. He picked up the black phone receiver. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. I picked up my receiver. I didn't say anything. I just waited. In an audit, silence is your best weapon. The guilty always rush to fill it. "Thaddeus," he whispered. His voice was cracked and hoarse. "Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is a nightmare. The food, the noise. I can't sleep. There is a guy in my cell who screams all night." I looked at him calmly. I looked at the orange fabric at his collar. "You look tired, Brad," I said simply. "Tired?" He let out a hysterical laugh that turned into a sob. "I am dying in here. Thaddeus, my lawyer, that public defender they gave me, he says the bail is set at $1 million. $1 million. Because of the flight risk, because of the offshore accounts. You have to help me post it. I can't stay here another night." I leaned forward, resting my elbow on the stainless steel shelf. "I can't help you, Brad," I said. "My assets are tied up. You know that. I am just a retired civil servant living on a pension." Brad slammed his hand against the glass. "Don't give me that," he hissed. "I know you have it. You bought the debt. You have millions. You can write a check right now and get me out. We can fight this from the outside. I repeated the word, tasting it. "There is no we, Brad. I am the plaintiff. You are the defendant. We are on opposite sides of the courtroom." Brad's face crumpled. He realized anger wasn't going to work. He switched tactics. He switched to the only card he had left, the card he had played for 7 years. "Thaddeus, please," he begged, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Do it for Tiana. She loved me. I was her husband. We were happy once. Remember the wedding. Remember how happy she was. If she were here, she wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want the father of her child rotting in a cage." I felt a cold spike in my chest when he said her name, but I didn't flinch. I let him talk. I let him dig. "And Maya," he continued, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Think about Maya. She needs her dad. I know I made mistakes. I know I messed up with the money, but I am still her father. You can't take a father away from his daughter. It will destroy her. We are family, Thaddeus. Family forgives. Family helps each other up when they fall." He looked at me with those pleading puppy dog eyes. He really believed it. He really believed that the word family was a magic spell that would erase 7 years of theft and neglect. He thought he could invoke the memory of the woman he betrayed to save his own skin. I stared at him for a long time. I stared until he squirmed in his seat. Are you finished? I asked. Brad nodded, sniffing. Please, Thaddeus. For the family. I took a deep breath. The air on my side of the glass was cool and filtered. Let me tell you a story, Brad, I said, my voice low and even. When I was an auditor, I used to see men like you every day. Men who thought the rules didn't apply to them. Men who thought they could charm their way out of math. But you know what I learned? Numbers don't have feelings. And neither do I. Not anymore. I leaned closer to the glass until my breath fogged it slightly. You keep using that word, I said. Family. You think because you married my daughter and shared her bed that made you family. You think because your name is on Maya's birth certificate that makes you family. I shook my head slowly. You were never family, Brad. You were a liability. Brad blinked, confusion clouding his teary eyes. What? From the moment Tiana brought you home, I knew what you were, I said. Beatrice knew it too. We saw the way you looked at our furniture, not with appreciation but with appraisal. We saw the way you ordered Tiana around disguised as affection. We saw the hunger in you. Not for love, but for status. I didn't say anything because Tiana was happy, I continued. And a father wants his daughter to be happy, so I tolerated you. I treated you like a speculative investment. I put my capital in hoping you would mature, hoping you would grow in value. But then Tiana died. I paused, letting the weight of that memory settle between us. When she died, the market crashed, Brad. The only reason I kept you around, the only reason I didn't crush you 7 years ago was because of Maya. I thought maybe grief would change you. I thought maybe the responsibility of raising that little girl would turn you into a man, so I tested you. Brad was staring at me now, mesmerizing by the coldness of my voice. Tested me, he whispered. The $40,000, I said. Every year. That wasn't a gift, Brad. That was a test. I saw his eyes widen. I sent you that money to see what you would do with it, I said. I could have paid the school directly. I could have bought the clothes myself, but I wanted to see if you had it in you to do the right thing. I wanted to see if you would put your daughter before your ego. And every year you failed. I held up my hand, counting on my fingers. Year 1, you bought a Rolex. I saw the receipt. Year 2, you took a trip to Cabo, alone. Year 3, you started gambling. I watched you, Brad. I watched you steal from your own child year after year. And every check I wrote, I wasn't funding your lifestyle. I was buying evidence. Brad shook his head. No, that is sick. You watched me. You let me do it. I let you show me who you really were. I said, you call yourself a businessman, Brad. So let's talk business. You are a bad investment. You are a depreciating asset. You have drained the capital of this family for a decade. And now I am doing what any smart investor does. I leaned back on the stool. I am cutting my losses. Brad's face went white. He realized then that there was no mercy coming. There was no check in my pocket. But we are family, he stammered again, his voice weak. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked down at him through the glass. He looked small. He looked like an insect trapped in amber. You are not family. I said, my voice hard as granite. You are a parasite, and I have fumigated the house. I turned to leave. Thaddeus, wait! Brad screamed, standing up. You can't leave me here. They will kill me in here. I have never been to prison. I don't know how to survive. I stopped. I turned back one last time. I looked at his desperate face. I thought about Maya running in the rain with bruises on her arm. I thought about Tiana's paintings in the dumpster. I thought about the Porsche and the diamonds and the lies. I walked back to the glass. I picked up the phone one last time. Brad grabbed his, hoping for a reprieve. I leaned in close. You said I sent you $40,000 to feed my grandchild, I whispered. You were wrong. Brad trembled. I didn't send that money to feed Maya, I said. I sent that money to buy a rope, a long, expensive rope, and I just handed it to you inch by inch, year by year. I smiled. It was a terrifying smile. The smile of the auditor who just found the smoking gun. And you did exactly what I knew you would do, Brad. You tied the noose yourself. You put it around your own neck. And 3 days ago at that party, you kicked away the chair. Brad dropped the phone. He staggered back, clutching his throat as if he were choking. I hung up the receiver. It clicked into the cradle with a sound of finality. I didn't look back. I walked toward the heavy steel door. Behind me, I heard Brad screaming. I heard him pounding on the glass. "Thaddeus! Thaddeus, come back!" The guard opened the door. He looked at me. Then he looked at the screaming man in the orange jumpsuit. "Is everything all right, sir?" the guard asked. "Everything is perfect, officer," I said. "Just closing a file." I walked out of the visitation room and down the long corridor. The screaming faded away until it was just a memory. I pushed open the exit doors and stepped out into the parking lot. The fresh air hit me. It smelled of pine trees and freedom. The sun was warm on my face. I walked to my car. I checked my phone. I had a text from Officer Miller. "Maya is ready for pickup. The emergency foster placement is over. You have temporary custody." I smiled. The real work was just beginning. I had a little girl to heal. I had a house to fix. I had a legacy to rebuild. But the weed had been pulled. The garden was safe. I got into my car and started the engine. I didn't look back at the gray concrete walls of the prison. Brad Sterling didn't exist anymore. He was just a number in a ledger that had been balanced and closed. I put the car in drive and headed home. The drive to the Department of Social Services building was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel of the Ford so tight my knuckles ached. I wasn't driving to an audit. I wasn't driving to a confrontation. I was driving to retrieve the only thing in this world that mattered. The paperwork was done. The judge had signed the emergency placement order granting me full temporary custody. Brad was in a cell, and Jessica was in the wind. The system that had briefly swallowed my granddaughter had spit her back out into my arms. I sat in the waiting room. It smelled of stale coffee and despair. It was a place where families were torn apart, not put back together. I watched the clock on the wall. The second hand seemed to be moving through syrup. Then the heavy security door buzzed. Mrs. Gable walked out first holding a clipboard. Behind her was Maya. She looked smaller than I remembered. She was wearing the same clothes she had run away and washed and folded, but looking threadbare. She was carrying a plastic trash bag with her few belongings. It is a sight that breaks your heart seeing a child's life reduced to a trash bag. She looked up. Her eyes were guarded. She had learned in 3 days what some people never learn in a lifetime. That safety is an illusion, and adults can't always protect you. "Maya," I said, standing up. She dropped the bag. She didn't run. She walked to me slowly and buried her face in my coat. I wrapped my arms around her. I felt her small shoulders shaking. I didn't say anything. I just held her. I let her feel the beat of my heart so she would know it was still strong, so she would know she wasn't alone. "Let's go home, baby girl," I whispered. She looked up at me. "To your house, Grandpa." "No," I said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "To our house. To your mom's house. It is ours again." The drive back to Elm Street was quiet. Maya stared out the window watching the city roll by. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. The red carpet was gone. The floodlights were off. The tow truck tracks were still visible in the gravel like scars, but the house itself stood proud. It was a sturdy house. It just needed to be cleaned. We walked inside. The air was still stale, smelling of the expensive perfume Jessica had drenched the place in. It smelled of the champagne that had been spilled and the lies that had been told. Maya stood in the foyer hugging herself. "It feels weird," she said. "It feels like they are still here." I locked the door behind us. "They are not here," I said firmly, "and we are going to make sure they never come back. Not even their ghosts." I went to the garage and came back with a box of heavy-duty trash bags and a pair of gloves. "Rule number 1 of an audit," I told her, handing her a bag. "If it doesn't belong in the ledger, you write it off. We are going to audit this house, Maya. If it belongs to Brad or Jessica, it goes in the bag. No mercy." A small smile touched her lips. "No mercy," she repeated. We started in the living room. We threw out the throw pillows Jessica had bought. We threw out the modernist vase Brad had put on the mantel to replace Tiana's family photos. We went into the kitchen and cleared out the refrigerator. We threw out the expensive pâté and the imported cheese. We threw out the wine. Then we went upstairs. The master bedroom was the hardest. This was where my daughter used to sleep. Seeing Brad's clothes in the closet, seeing Jessica's makeup on the vanity, it felt like a violation. I let Maya handle the small stuff while I took care of the heavy lifting. I swept Brad's Italian suits off the rack. I didn't fold them. I stuffed them into bags like dirty laundry. I took his shoes, his ties, his collection of cologne. I stripped the bed sheets. I took the mattress off the frame and dragged it into the hallway. "We are getting a new one," I grunted. "A clean one." By the time we were done, there were 15 bags sitting on the curb. The house felt lighter. It echoed, but it was a clean echo. There was one room left, the studio. We stood outside the door. This was where Jessica had tried to set up a nursery for her son. This was where she had thrown out Tiana's art supplies. I opened the door. The walls were half-painted a sickly pastel yellow. The floor was covered in drop cloths. It looked abandoned. Maya walked to the window. The trellis she had climbed down was still visible outside. "We have work to do," I said. For the next week, we didn't just live in the house. We healed it. We bought buckets of paint. Deep, warm terracotta, just like Tiana used to love. We sanded the floors. We bought new brushes, new canvases, new easels. We filled the room with the smell of linseed oil and fresh lumber, masking the scent of betrayal. It was on a Tuesday afternoon while I was fixing a loose floorboard near the window that I found it. I was kneeling down, hammer in hand. The board was warped, likely from the rain that had come in the night Maya escaped. I pried it up to replace the subflooring. Underneath, nestled in the insulation, was a book. It wasn't a ledger. It was a leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. I recognized it immediately. Tiana had bought this in Florence on her honeymoon. My heart stopped. I picked it up. My hands were covered in sawdust, but I wiped them on my pants before opening the cover. Property of Tiana King Sterling. Maya was downstairs making lunch. The house was quiet. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and I began to read. The early entries were happy. They were about the wedding, about Maya being born, about the garden. But as I turned the pages, the ink seemed to get darker. The handwriting became more jagged. October 14th, 2017. He asked for money again. He says the business is struggling, but I saw a receipt for a dinner at Le Bernardin. $300. I asked him about it and he screamed at me. He said I don't understand networking. He broke the vase Mom gave me. I told him I would tell Dad. He laughed. He said my father is just a retired bureaucrat who wouldn't understand high finance. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. She had protected me. She didn't want me to know he was abusive. I flipped forward. January 3rd, 2018. I found a second phone in his briefcase. There were messages. Women. Plural. I wanted to vomit. I packed a bag. I was going to go to Dad's house, but then he came home and he cried. He swore on Maya's life it was a mistake. He said he would kill himself if I left. He said it was just stress. I stayed. God help me, I stayed. I gripped the book so hard the leather creaked. He had manipulated her. He had used her kindness as a weapon. Then I reached the final entry. It was dated 2 weeks before she died. 2 weeks before the cancer took her. May 20th. I know I am not going to make it. I can feel my body shutting down. But I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid for Maya. I know who Brad is now. I know he is a hollow man, a greedy man. I want to change the will. I want to leave everything to Dad. But if I do, Brad will fight it. He will drag Maya through court for years. He will use her as a pawn. I can't let her last memory of her mother be a war. So I am going to trust Dad. I am going to trust that he will see the truth eventually. Dad, you always said numbers don't lie. Watch the numbers, Dad. Don't listen to his words. Watch the money. I know you will figure it out. You are the only one smart enough to catch him. Please protect her. I love you. I closed the book. I sat there on the floor of the room where my daughter used to paint, and I wept. I didn't cry when I found the fraud. I didn't cry when I saw Brad in prison. But I cried now. I cried for the silent burden my daughter had carried. I cried for the years she spent living with a monster to protect her child. And I cried because she was right. She knew me better than I knew myself. She knew I would need the trail. She knew I would need to be the auditor to save the day. Grandpa. I looked up. Maya was standing in the doorway holding 2 sandwiches. She saw my face. She saw the book. "What is that?" she asked. I wiped my eyes. I motioned for her to come sit beside me. "This," I said, "is a message from your mother." Maya sat down. She touched the leather cover. "Is it her diary?" "Yes." "Does she talk about me?" I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. She talks about you on every page, Maya. She talks about how much she loved you, and she talks about how she knew we would be okay. I opened the book to the last page. Read this, I said, pointing to the paragraph about me. Maya read it silently. Her lips moved, forming the words, "You are the only one smart enough to catch him." She looked up at me, her eyes shining. She knew, Grandpa. She knew you would save us. I pulled her into a hug. We sat there on the dusty floor, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and old memories. "I am sorry, Tiana," I whispered into the air. "I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I am sorry I let you carry that weight alone." But I promised her then and there. I promised the ghost of my daughter that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. I had caught him. I had balanced the books. We spent the rest of the afternoon reading the good parts. We laughed about the entry where she described Maya's first steps. We cried about the entry where she described her fear of leaving us. When the sun went down, we closed the book. We put it back in the floor, not to hide it, but to keep it safe. We nailed the new board down. We painted it terracotta. We ordered pizza that night. We ate it on the floor of the living room because we hadn't bought a new table yet. It was the best meal I had eaten in 7 years. The house was empty of furniture, but it was full of life. Brad Sterling was a memory fading fast like a bad dream in the morning light. Jessica Vance was a cautionary tale, but we were here. Thaddeus and Maya, the auditor and the artist. I looked at my granddaughter. She was laughing at something on the TV. She wasn't wearing shoes, but her feet were clean. She wasn't afraid. "We are going to be all right," I said aloud. Maya looked at me. "I know, Grandpa. We are kings. We don't break." I nodded. "No, we don't break. We just calculate the damages and we rebuild." And looking around at the fresh paint and the empty space, I knew that this renovation was going to be my masterpiece. The house on Elm Street wasn't just a home anymore. It was a boot camp. But we weren't doing push-ups in the backyard, and we weren't running laps around the block. We were doing something much harder. We were learning the language of the enemy. I sat at the head of the newly sanded dining room table with a stack of papers 3 inches thick in front of me. Across from me sat Maya. She was wearing a new pair of glasses we had bought yesterday. She looked serious. She looked older than 13. "Lesson number 1, I said, sliding a document across the mahogany. "Read the fine print." Maya picked up the paper. It was a standard lease agreement, the kind Brad had used for his tenants. She scanned it, her eyes darting back and forth. "It looks okay, Grandpa," she said. "It says the rent is $2,000 a month." "Look closer," I said, tapping the table with my pen. "Look at Clause 17. She squinted. "The landlord reserves the right to increase rent by 10% annually to account for inflation adjustments." I waited. "That means the rent isn't $2,000, she said slowly, doing the math in her head. "In 5 years, it is almost $3,000. "Exactly," I said. "A contract is a weapon, Maya. If you don't know how to hold it, you will cut yourself." "Your mother, God rest her soul." She only looked at the big print. She looked at the headline. She saw the word love, and she stopped reading. She didn't see the clauses about ownership and control. I saw a shadow cross Maya's face. She missed her mother, but she also understood. "I am not raising a princess." I told her, my voice stern but kind. "I am raising a CEO. I am raising a woman who can walk into a room full of wolves and know exactly which one is wearing a sheepskin suit." For the next 6 months, that was our life. Every evening after she finished her school homework, we did my homework. I taught her how to balance a checkbook. I taught her the difference between an asset and a liability. I taught her about compound interest and why credit card debt is a shackle that keeps you a slave. Some people might say I was being too hard on her. They might say, let a child be a child. But those people didn't see what I saw. They didn't see the bruises on her arm. They didn't see her shivering in the rain. Innocence is a luxury Maya couldn't afford. Not anymore. We set up a mock portfolio. I gave her $10,000 of play money and a spreadsheet. "Invest it," I said. "And if you lose it, you have to write me a 10-page report on why." She took it seriously. She researched companies. She read the Wall Street Journal instead of comic books. One night she came to me with a frown. "Grandpa," she said, pointing to a company she had been tracking. "Their profits are up, but their CEO just sold half his stock. That doesn't make sense." I smiled. It was the proudest moment of my life. "That is the red flag, baby girl," I said. That is the inside scoop. If the captain is getting off the boat, you don't buy a ticket for the cruise. She sold the stock on her spreadsheet. 2 days later, the company announced a federal investigation and the stock tanked. Maya looked at me, her eyes wide. How did you know? I didn't know, I said, tapping my temple. I just looked at the behavior, not the words. People lie, Maya. Numbers don't. But I didn't just want to teach her how to keep money. I wanted to teach her what money was for. Brad thought money was for buying watches and cars. He thought it was for showing off. He was wrong. Money is a tool. It is a hammer. You can use it to build a house or you can use it to break a window. We had a lot of money now. Between the sale of Jessica's engagement ring, which fetched a cool $12,000, and the liquidation of Brad's assets after the tax liens were satisfied, there was a surplus. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. I want to do something with it, Maya said one morning over breakfast. I don't want Brad's money. It feels dirty. It is not dirty, I said. It is just money. It has no memory. But if you want to clean it, we can wash it in something good. That afternoon, we went to the bank. We sat down with the branch manager, a woman who knew me from my IRS days. We want to open a trust, I said. A charitable trust. The manager nodded. What is the name of the foundation? Maya looked at me, then she looked at the manager. The Tiana King Scholarship Fund, she said clearly. I felt a lump in my throat. And what is the mission statement, the manager asked, typing into her computer. To help children who have lost a parent, Maya said. To pay for their education so they don't have to depend on people who don't love them. I reached out and squeezed her hand. We deposited the check. The money that Brad had stolen, the money he had used to buy silence and luxury, was now going to send a girl from the South Side to college. It was going to buy books and laptops. It was going to build futures instead of destroying them. As we walked out of the bank, the sun was shining. It felt like Tiana was walking right beside us. But the real payoff, the real moment I knew we had won, came 3 months later. It was a Sunday morning. The house was quiet, filled with the smell of brewing Earl Grey tea and toast. We had bought a new kitchen table, a simple round oak one that fit us perfectly. The walls of the kitchen were painted a soft yellow, the color of buttercups. Maya was sitting across from me, reading a thick book. It wasn't a novel. It was a biography of Thurgood Marshall. She put the book down and looked at me. She had changed so much in a year. She stood taller, her shoulders were back. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a sharp, intelligent gaze. Grandpa, she said. Yes, baby girl. I know what I want to be when I grow up. I took a sip of tea. I expected her to say an artist like her mother, or maybe an accountant like me. What do you want to be? I want to be a lawyer, she said. I put the cup down slowly. A lawyer. That is a hard road, Maya. Lots of reading, lots of fighting. I know, she said. But I want to do it. Why, I asked. She looked out the window at the garden we had planted together. The hydrangeas were in bloom, blue and purple, exploding with life. Because of what happened to us, she said. Because of Brad. He knew the law, Grandpa. Or he thought he did. He used the law to hurt us. He used the restraining order. He used the custody agreement. He used pieces of paper to try and crush us. She turned back to me, her eyes fierce. You saved me because you knew the rules better than he did. You beat him because you were smarter. But there are a lot of kids out there who don't have a Grandpa Thaddeus. There are a lot of moms like my mom who sign things they don't understand because they are scared. I nodded, listening. I want to be the one who reads the fine print for them, she said. I want to be the one who stands in front of the judge and says, no, you can't do this. I want to protect people like you, Grandpa. People who work hard and play by the rules and get taken advantage of by liars in expensive suits. I looked at her, and I saw the future. I saw her standing in a courtroom wearing a black robe. I saw her staring down a bully and making him blink. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was small, but it was strong. It was an artist's hand, but it had an auditor's grip. You will be a great lawyer, Maya, I said, my voice thick with emotion. The best, she smiled. And you will be my first client. I laughed. I hope not. I plan on staying out of trouble from now on. She squeezed my hand. You know what I mean. You taught me how to fight. Now let me fight for you. We sat there in the silence, sipping our tea. The ghost of Brad Sterling was gone. The pain of the past was fading into a scar, a reminder of where we had been, but not a map of where we were going. I looked at my granddaughter and I knew. I could close my eyes one day. I could leave this world and join Tiana. And I wouldn't have to worry, not for a second. because Maya wasn't a victim anymore. She was a warrior, and she was armed with the most powerful weapon in the world, the truth. I finished my tea. Okay, counselor, I said. If you want to be a lawyer, you need to understand logic. Open that book to page 50. Let's talk about the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. Maya grinned and opened the book. The lesson continued. But this time the teacher was learning just as much as the student. I was learning that love isn't just about protecting someone. It is about preparing them. And looking at Maya, I knew she was ready for anything. Time has a way of moving differently when you are at peace. The last 5 years didn't drag like the years of my grief. They flew by like pages turning in a good book. I am 78 years old now, my hair is completely white, and I need my cane not just for show but to keep me steady on the porch steps. But my eyes are still sharp. I can still spot a discrepancy in a ledger from across the room, and I can still see the truth when I look at my family. This morning the mailbox clattered shut. It wasn't a bill, it wasn't a demand letter from a lawyer. It was a thick envelope with a heavy crest stamped in blue ink. I sat at the kitchen table, the same round oak table where I taught Maya how to read contracts. The sun was streaming in, hitting the vase of fresh hydrangeas we cut from the garden. Maya stood across from me. She is 18 now. She isn't the scared little girl shivering in a wet t-shirt anymore. She is a woman. She stands tall. She wears her glasses with confidence. She has Tiana's smile, but she has my chin. Open it, I said, sipping my tea. Her hands were shaking, but this wasn't the shaking of fear. It was the vibration of a rocket engine waiting to lift off. She tore the flap. She pulled out the letter. She read the first line and then she screamed. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated joy that shook the dust off the rafters. "Grandpa," she yelled. "Yale! I got into Yale!" She ran around the table and threw her arms around my neck. I held her tight, feeling her laughter vibrate against my chest. My ribs ached a little, but it was a good ache. "We did it, Grandpa," she cried. "We actually did it." I pulled back and looked at her. I adjusted her glasses. "We didn't do anything I said. You did it. You studied until midnight every night. You led the debate team. You volunteered at the legal aid clinic. You earned this, Maya. Every single bit of it." She wiped a tear from her eye. "The scholarship letter is in here too. Full ride." I smiled. The Tiana King Scholarship Fund had grown over the years, but Maya insisted on applying for merit-based aid on her own. She didn't want handouts. She wanted to prove she could stand on her own 2 feet. I looked at the acceptance letter lying on the table. Yale. Pre-law. I thought about the money, the $280,000 I had wasted on Brad, the money that went to casinos and luxury cars and lies. I thought about how much pain that money had caused. But then I looked at Maya. I looked at the young woman who was about to go out into the world and fight for justice. I thought about the investment I had made in her over the last 5 years, the time, the patience, the love. That was the only investment that ever really mattered, and the return on investment was infinite. Later that afternoon, we packed her car. It wasn't a Porsche. It was a sturdy Volvo station wagon, safe and reliable. We loaded her boxes of books, her clothes, and the picture of her mother she always kept by her bed. I stood in the driveway leaning on my cane, the same driveway where I had watched Brad being led away in handcuffs. The gravel still crunched the same way, but the shadows were gone. Maya closed the trunk. She turned to me. She looked hesitant. "Are you sure you will be okay, Grandpa?" she asked. "The house is going to be so quiet." I laughed softly. "I like quiet, Maya. Quiet is good. Quiet means the audit is done and the books are balanced. I will come back every weekend," she promised. "I will bring my laundry." "You better," I said, poking her arm. "And bring your case studies. I want to see if those Ivy League professors know what they are talking about." She hugged me one last time. It was a long hug, the kind of hug that says goodbye to childhood. "I love you, Grandpa. Thank you for saving me." I kissed her forehead. "Go save the world, counselor." I watched her drive away. I watched until the Volvo turned the corner and disappeared. I was alone. I walked back up the porch steps. I sat down in the rocking chair. The evening air was cooling down. I pulled a letter out of my pocket. It wasn't the Yale letter. It was a letter that had arrived last week. The return address was the State Correctional Facility. It was from Brad. I hadn't opened it. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. It would be another plea, another claim that he had changed, another request for a character reference for his parole hearing next month. He was still in there. His hair was gray now, according to the report Mrs. Gable sent me. He worked in the prison laundry. He made 12 cents an hour. It would take him about 3 million years to pay back what he stole. I took out my lighter, the old Zippo I used to use when I smoked. I flicked the wheel. The flame danced in the twilight. I held the corner of the envelope to the fire. It caught quickly. I watched the paper curl and blacken. I watched Brad's handwriting turn to ash. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hate. I just felt indifference. He was a bad line item that had been redacted. I dropped the burning paper into the ashtray and watched it burn out. Justice isn't always a gavel banging. Sometimes justice is just an old man sitting on his porch knowing his granddaughter is safe and the man who hurt her can never touch her again. I looked at the photo of Tiana I kept on the small table beside me. The one taken the day she graduated college. "We did good, baby girl," I whispered to the picture. "She is going to be all right. The garden is weeded. The fence is mended. You can rest now." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was the color of royalty, the color of kings. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. It sounded like a whisper. It sounded like, "Thank you. I am Thaddeus King. I am an auditor. And for the first time in my life, I can close the book. The case is solved." We often mistake silence for weakness and generosity for blindness. But true love isn't just about giving, it is about protecting. I spent years funding a lie, thinking money could buy peace, but it only financed betrayal. The hardest lesson wasn't learning how to spot a snake in the grass, but accepting that I had let it into my garden. Remember, trust is a currency. Once counterfeit, it can never be spent again. Protect your legacy, not just with your wallet, but with your eyes wide open. Because sometimes the person shaking your hand is the one stealing your watch. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own battles, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from us. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had to audit the people in your life? I read every single one. Until next time, stay strong and watch the numbers.